I mentioned to Arlan that we had Michael Moore speak to us last week for Juneteenth. And when Arlan's name was brought up, Michael Moore made the point that Black people in America were the original source of venture capital to kind of build the economy as we know it in the United States. And Arlan, being someone in venture capital today, I wanted to get your perspective on that statement and kind of kick off the conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, we sort of, this country has been built on our backs. I think that's no surprise to anyone. Hopefully now it's no surprise to anyone. And I have a podcast called Your First Million, a series called Your First Million I've had for about a year. Our very first interviewee was Dr. Pamela Jolly, who is an expert in Black economic growth and wealth management. And she said, you know, we came here on the balance sheet, basically. We are wealth. So now it's time for us to actually benefit from that. And that perfectly describes what I feel about my own success and going from where I did to where I'm going and everything in between, and then catalyzing other people's success. And so I identify as a woman, as a person of color, as Black, as LGBTQ. And so we invest in all of those, like that's part of our mandate of our fund, which is the complete opposite of what Silicon Valley does, complete opposite. But I spend, you know, the one thing that you know about me when I walk out of the house is that I'm Black. That's something that can't be mistaken. You know, everything else can and has, but that's something that can't be. And so it's definitely, I take it with me everywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's not a choice, right? And
well, none of it is. None of the we are is a choice. But it's just the most noticeable. So it's been a part of me the longest. It's been part of my conscious the longest.
Absolutely. And I wonder, you know, now in response to a lot of the protests we're seeing, and many industries are having a continued reckoning with the lack of diversity there at all levels. Mm-hmm. I wonder, what is it from your perspective as someone whose fund is intended explicitly to invest in those specific underrepresented and underestimated groups? What is your reaction to like SoftBank, for example, putting out that huge fund that's kind of dedicated in a similar way? And you know, a lot of the big investment banks are doing similar things now in response to recent events. What does that say to you, and what does that mean to you as someone who's been doing this work for a while?
It says a few things to me. It says my book title, It's About Damn Time.
Absolutely.
It says that to me first. It's almost like, you know, I am certainly not going to be throwing parades for any of these groups for figuring it out way too late. Way late, not too late. Nothing is too late in my opinion. So it says that to me, that it's like, of course, they should be. This is what we've been saying for years. People have been saying this for years and years and years. Another thing I'll say is that with SoftBank in particular and a couple of others, I've called them out a little bit. I've embraced the Black operators at these funds who have been brought into these funds to help manage the money or help deploy the capital, and hopefully they are being given a lot of latitude rather than being told what to do. But SoftBank has $100 billion under management. So for them to put $100 million into this is $100 million is the least amount they'll put into a seed deal.
Wow.
Yes. So it is. I've said this on record, and I believe it. It is not enough, but it is something, and something has to mean something to us, right? So it's better than nothing. So I like that it came together in 24 hours. Time will tell how it's deployed. Right. Because I've gone to SoftBank. I went to SoftBank last year and I said, you should partner with Backstage and we should do $100 million fund because that's your seed stage. That's, I can't get upset with them for doing the same thing I proposed to them. But what I can say is that it is a drop in the bucket for them, and it's a drop in the bucket for all of these companies and these funds that are doing it. But if they are able to bring in Black operators, check writers, people who actually make decisions to help deploy this capital, they or anyone else on these private equity groups or these banks, then it is a step forward. It is something to look at, appreciate, emulate, hopefully, from others, because they do sort of a lot of the venture capitalists look to Big Brother PE, to say what are we supposed to be doing, or what is interesting and what makes money. Their LPs certainly are the limited partners who invest in funds are in private equity and they're in venture and they're in this and that and the other. So they're going to be speaking up, soon. Some of them already started. So I just think I think two ways about it very specifically, and one way is that it is a drop in the bucket, and the other way is let's take this drop in the bucket because we had nothing before, and let's turn it into something. Let's make it meaningful.
Right. Well, and it almost feels like that's a familiar strategy to those of us who have seen any kind of change, especially in the context of the corporate world when it involves money. It's like the effort maybe can be charitably disingenuous and uncharitably a PR move, more than concerted effort to change. But it almost feels like that's kind of how any of us are here in the first place, getting underestimated.
It is, briefly. I don't know if you. I spoke about this in a audio documentary I was part of. I don't know if anybody in the space here knows Designing Women, the TV show Designing Women, but it was on in the 80s, I think, and it was about 4 white women who were working at a place all together, and a Black man who had just left prison, and he works for them. And he's just a wonderful character. He's LGBTQ in real life too. Found out afterwards. And anyway, so he gets invited in one of these episodes. It's very Golden Girls type of show, right? So it's very campy. But he gets invited to the country club in Georgia, where they live in Georgia. He gets invited to the country club, and he goes to everything, and he's in doing everything. And finally, the women come to him who are his friends, who are really close friends of his, and they say, "Anthony, they're taking advantage of you. We didn't want to tell you this, but it's gotten too far. They're taking advantage of you. They're just trying to have a token Black person here, and we don't want them doing that to you." And he turns around and he fakes surprise. He says, "Do you think I just fell off the turnip truck?" He says, "Of course they are. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be at every barbecue. I'm going to be in every picture. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this." They think that I'm just going to show up once or twice. I'm going to be here every day because what I can do from the inside is change things, and I can bring people with me, and I can bring people with me. It has to start with one. That to me spoke to me so much, even though it was a funny backdrop. That's how I feel about a lot of what I do in venture. Is I know some of this is charity. Of course I do. I'm almost 40 years old. I've been around. I know some of it's charity. I know some people don't really believe we're going to do this or that and the other. But I'm cherry picking people who I'm going to work with and what money I will take and some I won't. And I'm going to use that and just use all my willpower to turn it into something.
Amazing. I love that. And I love that example. I made me think of something, but I think I'm gonna move on to some of these questions here before I monopolize the time with my questions, which I could do. I think this is an interesting question from Angela. She asks, what was the most difficult untruth you held about yourself that you have had to overcome?
About myself. I think it had to just do with, I've completely peeled away the idea of imposter syndrome. Instead of me feeling like me acting as if I have imposter syndrome, acting on that, oh, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here. I started deconstructing that and thinking, who is supposed to be here? How did other people get here? And why are they supposed to be here before I am, or instead of me? And when you start to break that down, you really start to understand that most of us should be in any room, that, and everybody kind of starts from somewhere, and everybody is faking it till they make it, and everybody's doing all these different things that we're looking around wondering. So that was a main one. I want to make sure I'm reflective when I answer the question, because I just understand you want me to like pick apart and find something. No, and I like those sorts of questions. I think I've just learned so much about myself in this whole process of building this fund and in writing the book, because you just have to like you have to like with a microscope look at your life when you're writing a book about it. And there's just a lot that I learned, and a lot of things that I think are put on people to believe for someone else's gain. So I've been able to overcome some of that.
Absolutely. I love that answer, because I feel a very similar way. And I have my best friend is, she's Nigerian, but she lives in the US. We went to school together. She's, of course, a Black lesbian. And we kind of have a similar outlook to what you've just articulated, where, we certainly understand that people may look at us, especially if we're on our real heavy gender nonconforming days, and maybe they think that we don't belong somewhere, but to us, we belong where we want to belong. So I love that articulation of moving away from the imposter syndrome, because I think I know it's unfairly experienced by women, by people of color, by LGBTQ community, and it seems like what I know my strategies, but what were some of your strategies that maybe if you had to work through that, what are some of the things that you've done that helped you get around that?
Oh, I mean, I think it was a lot of it was just sort of figuring it out as I go, but part of it was, sometimes you hear, well, I would just say, what did that guy get to do? How cavalier did that guy get to be about being here? What did this white man over here, like, I'll give you an example, I guess, maybe is sort of going first class on a plane or something. I spent 300 days away from home in 2018. 300. So I was on a plane 3, 4, 5 times a week, going everywhere, working with my portfolio companies. They live everywhere in the States and elsewhere, or speaking, or doing this or that. And so I would have these first class tickets, and I would go and kind of stand in line, and I mean, without fail, some person, usually a white man, usually a straight white man, would come up to me and say something to the effect of, "This is a first class," and try to step in front of me or something. And instead of being like overwhelmed by that, or sort of like, getting demure about it and like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here, I think about, how hard, like I was sleeping on the floor of the airport 5 years ago. That's where I lived. This man is not taking this away from me. So I would look at what these other people are doing, and how they took up space, how people with privilege and some people with entitlement take up space. And I would say, well, let me do that. No, do no harm, always a do no harm. But let me do that right back to you and just step right in front of you, sir. And that to me is just like it's like an easy example of what you can do in other spaces, at work, or at working on a company, or this or that. It's you take up space, you reclaim your time, as it were.
Yes, Auntie Maxine.
Yes.
Reclaim your time. I love that. And I think this is kind of in a similar vein, another question that got submitted about the founders of the companies you invest in. So when those underrepresented, underestimated founders come and tell the story of themselves and their companies, what are some of the unique obstacles they've faced that you think the general population doesn't understand are unique to the experience of women, people of color, LGBT people?
It's very, very nuanced, and it's very different. I mean, we saw more than 6,000 companies in the last 5 years to invest in those 130. We invest in about 2% of what we see. So I see companies every single day of my life, multiple times a day. And so everybody's going to have a different story and a different narrative, and there's not everybody's coming from the same place. And of course, we invest in women, so then there's a whole thing there. LGBTQ plus, there's a whole thing there. But a lot of founders who make it past like the first look because their companies are just, really interesting to us. There, some of the things that we've heard from them and have experienced personally is, say you do somehow get into the room with an investor and you really have a company that you believe should take on outside funding, because not everyone should. But say all of that's true. You get into a room, you're with an investor, let's call him Eric, and he's 39 and he's a white male and he's been working, he has an MBA and he's been working at this company for 9 years and whatever, he can write checks. Most of the time in those conversations, what I have heard and have experienced is that 45 minutes of those 60 minutes you have with Eric is spent in one way or another explaining your existence. And not excusing it, but legitimizing your background, your experience, your credentials. We've had there's a founder I'm thinking of right now. She's black woman, has a double degree. She has a degree in law and a degree in business. Has an incredible company that Mark Cuban and Serena Williams just invested in as I led the round. I brought both of them in. Wow. Before that, though, she was asked time and time and time again, did you really go to this school? We need you to send us some papers to show you went to this school. Can I touch your hair? Oh, your hair's so pretty. Can I touch your hair? And this is not literally just white men. This is, white women are involved, or Asian people, or this or that. But it's, imagine that, and you don't have to imagine it, because we also work with LGBTQ founders. So walk into a room, you might have an idea for something, or may have even had a product or service that is already making money. And then they're going to spend 30 minutes asking you about things that they should be paying someone to come in and work on diversity and inclusion for, rather than just talking to you about your company. So that's actually on the better side of things. That's the nicer side of things. It can get really dark on the not so, because there is an undercurrent of racism in Silicon Valley, and it's very much so known and talked about in back channels. And some very, very powerful people are known to be to have racist views, and so it's just even with the influence that I have today, I don't necessarily know the board that I'm working on. Like, let's call this playing board that I'm on, this game board that I'm working on. I don't necessarily know what's underneath it. I don't know if someone is kind of manipulating, pulling strings somewhere, who says, I don't know if they said, this is how far Arlan's going to ever get, and this is how far we're going to ever let her. I know that's kind of weird to talk about, but that's some of the stuff I think about sometimes, where you just never know, because I get a couple of back channel messages from people, and I'm like, that is something, that is incredible that this person I thought was okay was really telling people that I shouldn't get funding. That happens, so it is happening. But we persevere, and we win with our own success. We make our own success. Success is our activism, and or part of it. And even if we're playing on a rigged card table, we're gonna figure out a way.
And a lot of us are playing. I guess all of us really are playing on a rigged card table. That's really interesting, and I think that makes me think of, what some people, maybe a lot of people, believe, that racism, homophobia, sexism today, it's not a structural issue. It's not even really commonplace anymore. I think that's certainly a perspective that we're hearing, especially from like the white liberal wing, which is that, you know, it's not really happening anymore. San Francisco is the socialist wonderland, you know, Portland's like that too, right? But I wonder if I know this is a big question, but if you have any ideas of why that disconnect is so great between people who experience and see it and those who just believe that it's a thing of the past.
Oh, so much comes to mind. I think before the last few weeks, we had reached this point. I don't know when it happened, maybe after 9/11 or something. Maybe it's a certain generation, but and I was part of it. We had reached this point where there was a very friendly and almost like free pass thing happening with, we were like more diverse in our groups than ever in a lot of ways. Like I've always had a very diverse group, and people would be have been surprised at just how many different types of people are in my groups from starting out. I think we got to this point like in our late 20s and our 30s, and I'm talking about myself, where we kind of like the last 10 years we've thought, well, what we're talking about when it comes to race relations is in the past. And yes, Black people we know every day I'm going to be, I'm going to be discriminated against somewhere. Mm-hmm. Usually what happens is it's someone who's older, like by another generation, doing it for the most part. And if it happens within the generation, it is usually a microaggression that gets sort of talked about. Mm-hmm. And we've just sort of gotten used to that, and we don't want to dig too deep as Black people. We didn't want to dig too deep with it because we didn't want to have to become everybody's encyclopedia of diversity. And then it's in the turn, white people are like, well, we put up the banner, a mission accomplished. That was in the past, and we're new, and we're doing all this. And what really is going on is that these microaggressions were bigger than what we were making them. They were more, they're happening more often in more places and all part of our lives than we were saying. And so now with the last few weeks, it's almost like Me Too, because it's talked about so much, and because white people are so forced to like reflect and at least be, think about it. And Black people feel like, oh man, I've been waiting forever just to say my piece about this. Mm-hmm. It's all happening at once. And so people are willing to hear and willing to listen, and then people are willing to talk. And so it wasn't like it changed anything. It's just that we were bringing it more to light because we are stopped. It's like the real world. We had been polite for a while. We had been really polite. Like, we don't want to stir anything up because, we're all getting along so well. This is what we hoped for. And then it's like, oh, I forgot. They're still killing us in the street. That's right. It doesn't matter what age. And then it's just, no holds barred.
Yeah. Well, what a poignant but really appropriate place to end our conversation. Arlan, thank you so much for joining us. I've already gotten a lot of lovely messages about in appreciation, and we definitely look forward to having you join us again for a live event, hopefully sometime soon. And I thank you again for your time. It's been such a pleasure.
To make an introduction, but really needs no introduction. Arlan Hamilton is the founder and managing partner at Backstage Capital. Backstage Capital has been running a fund to invest in underrepresented founders for the last really 5-6 years. Now there's $7 million in the Backstage fund. You might have heard that Mark Cuban also recently gave Arlan Hamilton $6 million to invest in underrepresented founders. She is a prolific speaker, author, and just a hero for so many of us who are founders, and particularly tech founders in the ecosystem. And so we're going to hear a little bit about Arlan's backstory for those who are unfamiliar. It's such an inspiring story. And I was fortunate to meet Arlan, I think in the early days. And we met over Twitter like so many people do with Arlan, and was happy to have her in New York. in those early days, and just to see the growth of her company and Backstage, and now being part of the Backstage family. So Arlan, I just want to introduce you and have you come in and tell us a little bit about your backstory. I know that, again, there's so many articles on you, that you have the book for a deep perspective, but tell us a little bit about that sort of journey and your perspective in the last, 5 years, looking back to where you came from and where you are now.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mona, and everybody for being here and for having me come in. And I never, ever, ever expect that a room knows me, no matter what.
They would have to be under a rock to not know.
But yeah, so if you're not familiar, or maybe only heard a little bit so far, so I'll be 40 this month. I'll say it until I am. And starting at around 30 is when I started really understanding what startups were. I was born in Mississippi and grew up in Texas, and had bounced around the country as in my 20s, and in my 30s was still kind of struggling to figure myself out. And so if you're like 22 or 18 or something, and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life, please, please, first of all, don't think that way. But I hadn't figured anything out concretely. Had really cool gigs. So I was working in live music with different artists, and I worked my way up over that previous decade to that position. But I was still very curious about the startup world for various reasons. And like right as I was learning about it, I also learned about the disparities in the capital and the resources that were between white men in this country and anyone else. And I didn't think it was very fair, or didn't make much business sense either. So after a few rounds of just talking to people about it, I actually thought, well, why don't I try something myself? So I didn't have any experience, but I thought it could be interesting to take what I have learned about life and kind of the way that I am, kind of the way that I look at things, and see if I could apply it here. And so the idea was to invest. Really, I thought I might even stop at this. I don't think I've said that out loud, but I thought I might even stop at 100 companies, because that seemed like just an incredible amount of companies, and it was. But the idea was to invest in 100 companies by 2020, and to prove everybody who said that there weren't people who look like us building companies or worthy of backing and all that, prove them wrong. And went on to really struggle to raise for the first 3.5 years. There was really no one thinking that I could do that, or that it was a problem in some cases. And then starting in 2015, I started getting traction. And we have a documentary, actually, about an hour-long documentary, a little less than an hour, that's going to come out soon, that tells the full story. And you can actually, after all of the programming today, I would check out backstagecapital.com, because on the front page of it, we have the first 10 minutes, a sneak peek of the documentary. But it tells a little bit of that early story too. And over the past 5 years, got a team together, and Chacho and Megan are part of that team, and they're here. And we have a few other people, Christy and Brittany and Jamie. And we built it, really a large team, and then it kind of came back down. And we have invested, I don't know the exact number now, just because we made a couple of investments in the last, week. So it's harder to remember the exact number, but it is right at 150. And we reached 100 companies by 2018. So these are all led by women, by people of color, and or LGBTQ, which I am all three.
Right. I was just about to mention that. I was thinking you've broken so many rules in this industry, not only not having come out of a top tier school and sort of the normal sort of trajectory of Silicon Valley men, but just the fact that you're a Black woman, you're a queer woman, you're from the South. There's so many things that you have broken the mold for. And that, I think, is what you also see in so many founders, right? So a lot of the founders that you invest in don't come from that mold. And I think that's really the blessing in what you're doing. And it really has been sort of what we call the, underrepresented founder, or the under, sort of estimated founder. I think that's a term that you've come up with. You can get it on a shirt now and wear proudly. So there's obviously a common thread of all the founders that you invest in, and I'm hoping, including us as My Money, My Future, and resiliency, and stick in passionate. But are there things now that when you're looking at deals, are you looking at investing in the same way? And if not, what's changed and what's remained the same?
I think ultimately I have personally remain pretty much the same. And that means a couple things. If I think about it, it means I was a little bit ahead of my time. And then I'm also kind of rooted in it, right? Different people at Backstage will have different methods, and ways that they look at companies. And it's I think it's diverse. I love hearing the questions that other people on Backstage ask, because if I didn't catch something, they did, so I love that. What probably hasn't changed, but it's sort of been reiterated and confirmed, is that when you look at companies this early as we do, which is post idea, working, having customers, whether they're paying or not, but definitely really early in the process. When you look at companies this early, I had said early on, and I said you got to trust a lot of it. You have to trust your gut, and you have to look at a complete list of things. I'm not just looking to see if they're underrepresented. I'm not just looking to see if they're something that about their story touches me, because we're only investing in 2% of what we invest in. We're seeing thousands of companies. So it's not like just anybody can come in and say, oh, you're writing checks to Black people. Cool. So there's just this list that goes through. But what I also have said is that a lot of it is based on instinct. Mm-hmm. And what was been really fun is like seeing what was invested in 2016 and 17, and how some of those companies are today. Some companies have gone under, but that's just how venture is. But to see some companies really change, evolving in a certain way and proving out their own thesis, it says, well, I wonder what would have happened if I had put this through some sort of algorithm that was very buttoned up and very much so like everybody else was doing. I wonder if that would have just taken away any edge that I had. And that our team has. So we look at multiple data points. We're scrutinizing, because we have to have that level of, there's a line here. But maybe when we pattern match, right? We talk about pattern matching for grit. We talk about pattern matching for our own patterns. We're just looking at something slightly different, And I think what I've learned is to trust my instinct there. And also, of course, I would be a fool if I didn't try to keep evolving.
Right. No, absolutely. And especially now, you have shaped so much of the conversation around diversity in tech in fundraising. And particularly now, and I know that I'll go back and forth between sort of what you look for in founders, because I think that's really important and a lot of people are probably interested in that, but also what you're doing in the industry. You're very active, online, whether that's in Twitter or Instagram, and really shaping a thought leader and shaping the opinions of what people are doing in terms of diversity in tech. There's been obviously a lot of programming and money being thrown around in terms of Black Lives Matter. Do you think that money is, where do you see that going? Are we moving the needle with that, with what's been happening, and in terms of where you see the next phase of this going? Because there is a lot of talk, but is there a lot of check writing? Do you feel like the people are listening to what you've been saying for the last 5-6 years?
I think it's a mixture. I think that it's interesting that there are all of these sort of mandates now coming through. I'm not going to be anybody who's going to block anybody else's blessings, that's what I try not to do. So if that's happening and you feel like that's the right partnership for you, please take it. We're certainly having those conversations ourselves. But I still today, just like I was 5 years ago and 10 years ago, I'm not going to sit here and throw a parade for people who say they're going to do something, who say, now we get it, and now we're going to say all this, we're going to have all this money. Well, the moment you put that out there into the world that you're going to donate or invest or set aside and carve out for the next X number of years, X amount of money or Y amount of money, you also are getting such incredible publicity and marketing share and return for that. So to me, it's like a balance. It's like you put out what you get back. Now the real test is over time. What do you actually do? What do we actually do? And it's been only a few weeks. And so I'm not trying to call anybody and say, I got to see results right away, but hopefully people are working feverishly like they would any rollout internally. And so they better believe there are multiple people keeping track of them and will come out next year and say, this is the first step of what they promised. And they will make a list, and with multiple people making lists of, these are the groups who said they were going to do something and it actually meant something. And these are the groups who simply put their marketing words to great use and got that earned promotion.
That's right. That's right. And I think this is we're in the early stages, hopefully, and really partially, mostly because of the work that you've been doing and pushing this conversation is, are there other ways? I know when we first started, equity crowdfunding was still kind of questionable. People were like, I don't know if this is actually a thing. People that get equity crowdfunding, they're not real companies. I mean, there was those early conversations that I know you remember. And now there is just such a stronger element here where lots of underrepresented founders are going that route to earn and to gain some early capital. But we do have a chicken and egg problem in some ways, right? So a lot of funds are created for those folks who are new to this. A lot of funds are created by entrepreneurs who sell their companies, right? That's the windfall happens. And then with that windfall, you create a fund and you invest in other people. And one of the problems is that we don't have a lot of those big exits yet. Yeah. We're getting there, right? So there's a little bit of that chicken and egg problem. What are some of the other ways in which we're moving the needle, whether that's equity crowdfunding, more angel investors? Hopefully there's some potential angels on this call today that look like us, right? So people in corporate, what can they be doing? How do people start to invest in equity crowdfunding, or just some of your ideas about sort of the ways in which we've expanded capital, access to capital?
Yeah, I mean, these are all, they stand alone and they could all have their own summits. They're all very big initiatives and things that, to think about. And it's a lot about philosophy too. It's a lot of it. So briefly, when you think about crowdfunding, crowd equity funding, which I think it was 2012 when the Jobs Act, the real kind of letting other people invest, even if they're not considered accredited based on the FCC, which I know you've had a lot to do with. That was sort of the beginning of, okay, the rumblings, like you said. Recently, I think in the last 2 years, and especially this year, you're just starting to see more and more of those really happening and people being less timid about it. You say about Bitcoin and all that, I used to compare it to Bitcoin being separate from that. I used to compare it to like LASIK eye surgery, and say, let other people figure it out and kind of get it. And then you come in, let's all of us come in later. And I think that's what people were doing with crowdfunding. I think they wanted to see how it worked, how it was regulated, how things could happen over time. And now people feel much more trusting of it. And it's mostly because people have been playing nice. People have been minding their whatever Q's and P's, or however you say that phrase. And I think that even within our portfolio, we've seen so many companies do this crowd equity rounds publicly, which are on things like Republic.co or WeFunder or Seed Invest. And recently, 4 months ago or so, Backstage relaunched and really kicked off our own syndicate, which is BackstageCrowd.com, where accredited investors, yes, can get into our deals, and we've had really great success there, but also non-accredited today, by the definition today, investors can get in. And what they do is they invest alongside us in our deals. So many people have said, I can't wait to be an angel investor. I can't wait to have my own fund like you do. You don't have to wait.
Right.
If you are 18 and old, that's really the only thing in the United States. If you're 18 plus, you can go to backstagecrowd.com. You can choose non-accredited. Most people are going to be unaccredited unless you make $200,000 a year or more. And you'll start to get deals that we go into on these public sites. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the minimums are like $100. Sometimes they're like $250. So that's still quite a bit of money. But think about, if you save up for something like that over time, you have equity in a company rather than maybe spending $100 on sneakers to have somebody else have the ownership in the company.
That's right.
I think the future is that. I think the future is crowd. And I've been saying that for years, and now it's like really revving up. Yeah. It's so exciting. And it'd be kind of cool to talk a little bit about what you've been doing, because I know I've been talking to the SEC, you've been talking to the SEC when it comes to changing these regulations around what is considered an accredited investor, because who says that you're smarter because you make 200,000 more or more? But others can't.
That's right. And just for those who, so we can clarify, so the accredited investor standard, like Arlan was saying, is that you have a net worth of over $200,000, not including your home. And this is the part that's particularly harmful for us, for people who might not come from money. We have a huge wealth gap in this country. And this has always been part of my advocacy, is that that rule, in fact, has a disparate impact on people like myself or others who obviously are smart enough to be investors, but might not just have that money for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And so lots of people have been working on changing the accredited investor rules. There has been a recent update. Unfortunately, though, the update didn't affect this particular number, right? So the 200,000 is still in effect. No, what it does do is it opens it up to a couple of more people who have, for example, like a Series 7 or some kind of a registered investment advisor sort of certificate. So there's still more work to be done. And one of the reasons that this is so important is that, if you were able to get into a Twitter as a private investor because you were an accredited investor, you got the best deal possible. That means that most people, 90% of Americans, are not getting that deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's be clear too, because not all deals are going to be Twitter, right? A lot of deals are going to either not materialize to anything, like you're going to lose it, like you did a lottery ticket maybe. A lot of deals will just kind of get you back the same money you put in, and some deals are going to actually return. So you would never put more money than you're willing to lose into any one deal or any combination of syndicate deals.
Right.
But you're right about, think about Twitter, the Twitter example. I know personally now, for 5 years ago I wouldn't have believed this, but today I know so many people who were early in Twitter, and they were early in Twitter with $5,000, with $25,000, which to them was mostly just not that big of a deal. It wasn't like they were rich, but it was mostly like, oh, I'll come in, sure. There's even a guy who brags about putting it on his credit card. Now, that guy, I happen to also be an investor in us, so I'm not going to dog him out right this moment, but it's true. That those are things that, if that had been some sort of party round with 100 people of color or a syndicate, and we were all in that, we would be then going out and angel investing in other companies, starting our own companies from friends and family. We would have a bank account. And it just feeds on itself. The same way the PayPal mafia feeds on itself, the same way so many things feed on themselves.
Yes, and we hope that the Backstage is going to actually do that, right? It's going to, now we have the Backstage crowd and the syndicate there. So again, folks don't need to go and create your own things often. Like that, I often find that to be sort of a complex. Yes, we need more representation, but in fact, there's more small dollars than there are big dollars. And so this is why I've always been an advocate of equity crowdfunding on platforms like Republic, very long supporter of them as well. But that ability for all of us to put some money aside and say, this is where I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I think that the Backstage is now a conduit for so much of that work.
Yeah, I said that $1 billion. When we see $1 billion, that means that's 1,000 million, right?
Right.
I say I'd rather see 1,000 millionaires, 1,000 people who have $1 million, than one person who has $1 billion.
Right.
And that is what could happen from crowd equity funding. That's what could happen from starting your own company. That's why the work that you all do at this organization is so important, because you talk, and the work that you do as someone who is building, that's why it's so important. Because in a very short amount of time, very few years from now, we could be talking about thousands and thousands of new millionaires and maybe 100,000aires who are angels, who completely turn this country on its ear in a positive way.
Right. That's right. And it is about equity. And so in speaking to equity, actually, just to kind of talk a little bit about the macro political environment we're living in, but also not just with the Black Lives Matter, but also the change in demographics in the country, right? You were early and are going to write a very long tail on the fact that we are now starting to see the change in the demographics of this company to the new majority or majority, minority, however you want to talk about it. The bottom line is that if we don't have founders in Silicon Valley building for the new majority, then we're just losing money. And sort of, what does that opportunity look like? Are you looking at the next 10 years or the next 20? What are you most excited about right now?
Oh, well, they say that we'll be a majority minority by 2040. I think that number changes depending on who you ask, but I look at things in decades, essentially, and especially coming, like I said before, coming up on my 40th, knowing exactly where I was on my 30th, and what has changed in those 10 years, if we all think about it. Now, if you're 18 or 20, you can look at it too, like so much has changed, but it really starts to kick in 20s to 30s to 40s to 50s. And I think about just what can be done over the next 10 years. Because what we did, it was really almost a 10-year journey, but the last 5 of those have been off the chain, have been out of this world, and not easy. But we're finally starting to have a different conversation as a team. I think we all noticed it recently, that it's just different. It's a different conversation. We're not rolling in dough yet, but we're sort of we can have different conversations than we used to have.
Yeah.
And those power dynamics are different today.
Right.
So when I think about like just the positive, optimistic side of me, think about change. I think about the next decade, and then I'm going to spend the next decade just going all in. And after that, once I hit 50, I'll see what I'll do then, right? But I'm looking forward to this.
Great. It's interesting. So, as you know, the work at My Money, My Future is all about building intergenerational wealth, right? It's legacy building. And so much of that has to do with, financial freedom and building that next generation of wealth. What does money, or what does financial freedom mean to you? I mean, I remember just not that long ago, you posted a picture of Mama Sims, and you had bought her a car, I believe. And it was just like, those are the kinds of things I think about on a personal level, where, someone pays off their mom's house, someone does something in a family that really changes the trajectory of that wealth building. So what does that mean to you? What does financial freedom mean to you?
Yeah, for me, it means a combination of both. I mean, I think of most things individually and as a group, right? That's, and I don't know what order necessarily I think of it in, but the ability, I think it has to start individually for it to be able to radiate across, hundreds of millions of people. When I think about, you mentioned buying a car for my mom. So I think about that at 39, just earlier this year, I bought my mom a really nice car, something she's wanted for a while. I thought back to all the different cars we had and didn't have, because a lot of times we didn't have a car, it was mostly that. But I thought about that, and people were like online, they were like, oh man, you bought your mom a car. Oh my God, you must feel so good. You must feel like you just really made it. And I just said, and I said and felt, I don't feel like I bought that car. I feel like the work that my mom did the first 40 years, 39 years, bought that car, you know, combined with the work I've done, bought that car. And so she was already building generational wealth and kind of enabling me to be able to do what I do. And that's why, you know, I don't have children, but I like the idea of catalyzing so many people. That's why I do. That's why I wake up every day thinking about how many people can we catalyze?
Right.
That those seeds are planted every which way so that the individual feels empowered. And when the individual feels empowered and no longer feels like they have to cower or ask permission or think that they're less than, when you have one or two people like me screaming like, oh, you know, I'm all that, and look at what I did, and look, I'm on the cover of this. Okay, that's interesting. But when you have us all raising our voices like that, you can't deny it. You can't shut it off. You can't turn it back. And that is what I think. You empower people individually, and you think about walking into places like the White House. You think of walking into places like banks across the country, universities across the country, and you're starting to see over the decades portraits of Black and Brown and Indigenous people. Where, as with right now, or you know, as opposed to right now, where almost all of those institutions, unless they're historically Black universities, look like some sort of museum of what once was. So yes, it's in creating something for people, your offspring to have, and paying for generations down the line for you not being here. I'm 100%, because whatever my mom was able to do is because of what her mom was able to do, and so on. However, it is also about you today and you in the next few years getting to enjoy yourself and your life today. And so I don't think there's anything wrong about like owning success, being happy about achieving something small and large. I said today, I think it was today or last night, it was real late at night. I think it was like 12, because it could have been either day. I was like, you know, one of the legacies I want to leave behind is that I want to make Black women feel entitled. Because that's a new thing. That's different. We're always about that. So I want us to feel entitled.
That's right. That's right. So you have been, you know, a powerhouse in creating different brands and distributing the knowledge that you've learned, you know, the book, through the podcast. And by the way, folks, if you're not on the podcast, get on the podcast. Come on. You know, buy the book. TV shows next, I'm assuming. I heard on the podcast a conversation about possibly running one day. Perhaps it's our responsibility, I think is the word you used, to run for a public office, maybe. What's on the horizon for you personally in terms of your own brand and distributing that knowledge that you're learning and working on every day?
Yeah, I think public office would be something, if I ever did that, it would be something really not flashy. Because that podcast was about the fact that I just didn't know enough. I didn't know enough a few years ago and up until now. You know, I didn't know how many people it took to really run local and national government and policy, and how important policy was and how like impactful it is. So it was really encouraging people to look into that, especially if you have any affinity towards it already. So my thing is mostly I'm going to be the person, the way I look at it is I'm the person catalyzing. And so if that means earning, you know, a wealth so that I can put it behind other people, so I can, you know, because I don't think there's not much I can do on my own. You know, there's not much I can't make a huge impact on my own. But if I can earn, build, and then put that right back in to the soil, just there's no stopping us, right? So I think that's there. I think representation and amplification of our work is just so important. And so that's why I'm very excited also, because I love entertainment. I think that television and movies and music and podcasting, all of that, I think is just a lot of fun. So there are a lot of things in the works there for sure. Because I just think it's mainly, that's the main tool. I think, it's almost like with masks and COVID. I just don't understand why we haven't had like a major fashion show with masks. Why we haven't been like masks are the new sneakers. Why we haven't, because that sort of entertainment influences this country and the world so much, so deeply. And the same reason white men from the time they're 2 years old get to look up at posters of Superman and look up at posters of all these heroes and cowboys and all of that. So they have this sense of like, even if they don't have entitlement themselves, they feel very proud of themselves because that's what they see reflected.
Right.
I want to reflect us in so many positive ways as well. And that positive doesn't necessarily mean like buttoned up and precise and very specific. It can mean a whole lot of things.
That's right.
That we contain multitudes, as they say.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's fantastic because it makes it more accessible, right? I think that's part of what you're doing is making this world that's been pretty much buttoned up. When we think about finance and VC and is a part of finance, it's very much a white man's world. And which is why we always talk about changing the face of finance. You literally have to switch out the faces. People have to see us in these roles to associate it with, it's accessible. You can do it. As we move into questions and answers, I want to ask you a little bit about mental health, because I think that, the conversation obviously is something that's so important during this time. And so, with the social unrest, and then we've got COVID and people just feeling really isolated. But you've been someone who's been a big proponent of, taking naps and doing things to make sure to take care of your mental health for a very long time. And just what are some of the things that you can share with people out there? Because, as a founder, you're always stressed out. There's pretty much. And, what are some of the things that you practice in your routine that has kept you healthy and sane over the course of your work?
Yeah, for me, people kind of associate me with the nap because I talk about that a lot, because I no longer have certain vices. I don't drink. I guess my vice is food. I love a good meal, I will say, and COVID has not been helping with that. But it's not necessarily one thing or the other. It's not necessarily one thing, because different things are going to work for different people. I just think it's also like this understanding that you have permission to take care of yourself, and you have permission not to be stressed out to the max, worked, overloaded, exhausted, drained of all energy and creativity. And you still considered a real founder if you do that, if you don't do that to yourself. So many people, there's certainly a hustle culture in startup land that is toxic and dangerous and is not rooted in any sort of logic. And I've said this a few times, so if you've heard me talk about it before, it's going to be redundant, but most of the people who you see on your Instagram or on your Twitters who are talking about hustling and, I work hard, sleep when you're dead, all this, most of them or a combination of, they either have a 20-person team, a 10-person team, a 5-person team. I have a team. It's not like I'm walking around and I know where I'm supposed to be all the time. I have a team. That's how you're able to get this stuff done. How do you do it? This is how. You have a team.
Right.
Or they have a lot of resources, or they have full-time childcare. And then you have the people watching it, and they're living in the real world. And they're like, man, I'm not productive enough. I'm not as far as I'm supposed to be. I'm not this because that person's able to do it. And they're like 23 or they're like 37. They're supposed to, I'm that age. I'm supposed to be where they are. How in the world do you know how they got there? Mm-hmm. Unless they tell you outright. Mm-hmm. And if they care about you, they'll be honest with you. Mm-hmm. So I just think That's why I'm very big on, especially grown folks, take naps, delegate, delegate.
As the over 40 crowd, definitely take naps. I need 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
There's no
the
doubt.
sleeping too. Like I get 7 or 8 hours of sleep every single night, unless a night before I don't have anything to do and I just want to binge something.
Exactly.
But if I'm going to work the next day, I get 7 to 8 hours sleep each and every time. And it doesn't matter if somebody's waiting on the other side of that. Oh, we want you to do this, this, and the other. That's too bad. There's one life to live here. So I got to do it, right? I got to be healthy as much as I can. Certainly not as healthy as I could be. And just, a good pair of sweatpants, as we have come to all know. I've been saying this since 2018.
Right. You always have great sweatpants and good shoes, good sneakers, comfortable shoes.
Yeah, and Ingrid pointed out I have my hood up. That's part of it. I was going to speak at a real fancy situation a few weeks ago, and I got online, and the first thing they said was, "Arlan, do you mind taking your hood off so we can see you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So I wore the heck out of that. They're like, "Oh," because there's a comfort in it. You won't catch me in this every day, but when I'm wearing it, there's a comfort in it for me. It's aesthetic comfort. It's hard out here for a Black woman in the COVID streets with hair care. It's also for like comfort. Today was, like I said earlier, before we started, it's been a very odd day for me, and it's been a one of those days where I kind of needed a little extra self-care, and so this actually feels like comfort to me.
That's right.
And I think that's what people can pull from.
Yes, and I think that especially as for all the founders out there. For so many founders of color, it's a long game. I think everyone goes in thinking they're going to raise all that money in that first year and going to rank your rounds and you're going to sell. I mean, because there's this sort of myth that this is like, 5 years and then you're going to be, a millionaire. For 90% of people, that's not true. I mean, we've been at this for now like over 5 years, and it is a long haul. So you have to take care of yourself, and know that you can pull back a little bit. Sometimes you're not always going to be at 100%, and that's okay. If you're passionate about the work and the work is making sense, then you'll get there. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Right. So I know that we want to leave time for everyone to ask some questions. Maybe as we transition into that, is there anything that right now that the fund is looking at that's exciting? I know that you're agnostic in terms of, whether it's fintech or consumer tech, et cetera, but anything just interesting that you're seeing right now that you're like, oh, I like what's happening here.
Not necessarily in industry. This is personal response. You might want to get in touch. Anybody can get in touch with anybody at Backstage by their first name at Backstage Capital. Go check out backstagecapital.com, sign up for office hours, look around. But for me, I don't think it's necessarily a certain place. I find so many to be interesting. But I am really excited by the fact that this year alone, I know this year we have seen the most deep tech that we have seen in the whole journey, which means like really technical. Some of it is frontier stuff. Some of it is kind of infrastructure. Some of it is just something that would take decades for someone else to kind of just figure out how to do. A lot of it is around sustainability. All of that. Those are really, really interesting to me, where it's almost undeniable how valuable it is when you walk into it. And so that's just one kind of space that I'm thinking that is like, it can go across many different industries. And there are so many like brilliant hackers, both on the software side and on the hardware side. And that's when I think about this organization, I think about that kind of mind who's like, yeah, this is how you create.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna. Thank you so much, Arlan, for having this conversation. And it's always a pleasure to be in conversation with you. So thank you. And we're going to turn it over to Anna for Q&A.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much, Ramona and Arlan. As we transition to our Q&A, I wanted to remind everybody that as part of attending this event, we will have three individuals be gifted the book of Arlan. So it's about damn time book, right behind her, as you can see on her screen. And in doing so, Arlan, I just wanted to ask you, can you give me three numbers randomly from 1 to 55, and then I'll work my magic behind the scenes and get our three lucky winners.
Absolutely. I'm going to say 36.
36.
13.
13.
And 51.
51. Thank you so much, Arlan. So now I'm going to pass along to my colleague, Catherine Olivas. She's going to be facilitating our Q&A session. And we just want to encourage everybody to please put your questions in the chat so that we can share that with Arlan. Thank you again.
Thank you. Congratulations to the three. Oh, she needs to be unmuted. Steven. I think I can do it, I think.
Thank you, Arlan. I appreciate it. Sorry about that. All right. So we got some really great questions from everyone in the chat. So I'm going to start off with the first one that was really early on. And this is coming from Mahmoud. He wants to know, can you talk a little bit more about instinct? What does that mean to you? Where does it come from? What influences your instinct? Is it more of an emotional response to conversations or certain specific green flags you see?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm going to give you just a quick version of it. There's a deeper version that I go in on a podcast by my friend Beta Luca. So Betta Luca. She has a new podcast. I was a guest on there just a few weeks ago. Find that podcast and we go really into instinct. But generally, I like to think about instinct being a kind of a series of trial and error, helping you build kind of an algorithm of starting to trust your own judgment. So it takes a little bit of risk and it takes a little bit of putting yourself out there and being willing to be wrong. But you can start at any age and you can just sort of start saying, I'm going to start making decisions and kind of keeping a track of how those decisions pay off when it comes to like, who do I have in my orbit, in my world, what opportunities I say yes or no to, where what I decide on. And sometimes you're going to be wrong. That's what happens. But even in the wrong, you can sort of learn. So that when I apply that to looking at companies, I had to be okay with, the first 10, 20 companies you invest in, there are going to be some that you got wrong, maybe, that you didn't understand. Then I come to learn that's just never going to go away. So I just think about always refining, and it always just comes back down to I trust my instinct. I may not always be right, but I trust it because I've just spent so much time studying it. And like I said before, we do look at other factors when it comes to companies, because if it was only based on instinct, if only based on gut feeling, that's too emotional, actually, because when you're investing other people's money, you can't just say, okay, that person I like, 5 minutes we talked, I like them, they have good energy. That's not what I mean. It's about a combination of it. So much more clarity on that in that podcast episode.
Thank you again. Sorry, I'm going to keep myself off mute so I don't have to do that again. Thank you for that. Our next question is from Vanetta. I love the Backstage crowd. Do you encourage upwardly mobile people of color to start syndicates in their communities? What are the disadvantages of platforms like this?
Yes. So I would say if you're not doing this full time like we are, I would not suggest that you set up like a whole syndicate sort of website and because it's a whole platform. It's sort of expensive for us. It takes several people to run, and there's a lot that you take on. And some people just aren't allowed to start if you don't have like a fund already and all these different things. But what you can do is you could start an angel group. Now, the angel group could be people who already can invest, and it can also just be aspiring angels. There's certainly angel groups that exist already that you could kind of be part of. But if you're thinking about like with Backstage Crowd, what I would encourage people to do, and we've been talking about it a little bit, is like we've done all the vetting. We supply so many materials for people to look at before they decide if they want to invest on our accredited ones. And our non-accredited, those are supplied by the other platforms that we send you to. So what if you got together with a few people and you started making decisions together as a group and looking at them? So that's something that is actually we're going to start implementing a little bit over time with Backstage itself. So I would say if you can invest already, either join an existing angel group or angel syndicate or several. If you can't, or if you haven't joined one, you want to do something more personal that you actually start yourself or a big part of, then I say, yes, I would encourage that. Just be extremely careful and have some sort of legal and or accounting counsel.
Awesome. Our next question is from Tiara. Outside of being an angel or an investor, can you demystify the job market within VC startups? I'm interested in making this shift in career as a Black woman who's interested in closing the wealth gap in my community, especially for Black businesses needing capital.
Yeah, so venture capital, our fund was started in a very different way than most VC funds. It's also much smaller than most VC funds. But there are certain, like in most places, there are like a certain number of funds. There's a finite number of funds. Don't know how many that is. Maybe it's 1,000, maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's 800. I'm not really sure. But in the United States, there are a certain amount of funds. They range from anywhere from 5 million to 2 billion or more if they're big Sequoia or Andreessen or something like that. But most of the funds that we deal with who are not those behemoths are anywhere from $25 million funds to $200 million funds. For every $25 to $50 million under management, they may have one partner. So if it's a $200 million fund, they may have 4 partners and maybe 2 or 3 people who help analyze deals. And then they may have someone or 1 or 2 people who are like executive assistants. And that's kind of a makeup. I mean, it's very general. You can go to different websites to see others. There's some that have, 600, 800 million under management, and they'll have 20 people, 30 people, but it's still pretty small when you think about the amount of money that's going in, because the way that they pay the salaries for these people isn't like they have 200 million, so they have 200 million to spend. They have 200 million to invest in companies over 7 to 10 years. And usually they'll take 2% of that number every year for expenses and overhead. So a $200 million fund usually is going to have something like $4 million. They then can decide, okay, we can hire 12 people. We can hire 6 people. And so it's very sort of insulated, small groups. A lot of people get into venture by going through MBA programs or going through it's very warm introduction place, which is why it is also so surreal that I was able to break in. A lot of ways people break in is by starting their own funds. Incredibly difficult. Not going to lie to you, incredibly, incredibly difficult, and has not stopped being difficult no matter what influence we have. But it is a way. And you see now with things like Angel List, rolling funds, you see with the Black VC, without an A, Black VC, they have started something where they are empowering people to start writing checks. There are different organizations now, and I will dare say that Backstage had influence on some of those, where they will hand you $100,000 and say, for a year, go out and find 4 companies to invest $25,000 in. And those are really exciting. There's also one by a former Backstage principal named Lolita Taub, who I'm sure most people here know, but you can find her on Twitter. She has now a $5 million fund where she was able to go and find like 10 or 12 people to help her deploy that. So look for those funds. First Round Capital does it too. Look for those different programs that have these sort of angel training, and then they empower you to make investments.
So thank you. Thank you so much. Our next question, kind of goes into that idea of connections and relationships. It's from Keith from WhereWorks. Really awesome company, everyone. You got to check it out. He's asking, the warm intro is considered the gold standard as the best way to get access to investors you don't have personal relationships with. Without those connections directly, can you comment on the best ways to cold connect with investors for fundraising?
Well, we don't have a warm introduction policy at Backstage. You can go to backstagecapital.com. You can apply for office hours, which I saw was another question I just happened to see pop up. We have rolling office hours, and they're group office hours. So you don't have to know anybody at Backstage in order to talk to us. Like, that's not, and that Ramona mentioned earlier that a lot of people, including Ramona, found me through Twitter because I'm accessible. More and more, it's harder because I have thousands of messages a week. But you at Backstage, there's certainly an application process you can go through if you're ready, if you feel you're ready. Office hours to get warm feeling about it, whatever. And then a lot of places are now doing that. More and more places are now doing where they are allowing for that cold introduction. Warm introduction, if you have a fund who does not have a does not have a cold introduction mandate, and you still want to work with them. And I say that, cheekily, because it's like, do you really want to work with someone who doesn't want to know you unless you've already been in their sort of little orbit? But if you still do, there are ways you can go to. A lot of funds like to have events, especially now with COVID, virtually. So you can attend those events, attend their panels that they're on for other people, get to know them a little bit better, research them. I used to go on LinkedIn and see who people knew and see if I could get, that way kind of a warm introduction. If it was truly a cold one, but I was trying to turn it warm. But then after a while, I just started saying, let me just start seeking out the people who actually are making the effort to not be so isolated and insulated. That's who I want to be around.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. We have one from Norval. How can entrepreneurs and innovators and investors deal effectively with the structural forces that exploit labor and perpetuate poverty?
Mm-hmm. That's a big question. I don't know if I know the answer to that just right offhand, because I also don't know if I know the full question. I don't know if they want to expand on it and we go to the next question and they come back to it.
Sure. Yeah, Norval. Yeah. Norval, if you want to give us some more context, I can take a look at that. It looks like you answered Karen's questions about the office hour request. Mm-hmm.
So we do those once every couple of months. So just sign up for it. We just had a couple and they were really fun.
Awesome. Right. We have a question from Ingrid. Should Black folks invest in undervalued environments or look for literally greener pastures?
You should absolutely invest in undervalued. You just said it with the word undervalued. You're getting it when it's undervalued. So think about what that turns into if you nurture that. So yeah, I think sometimes the route is, and this is not necessarily bad or good or right or wrong. Sometimes the route is to go out, go get some resources elsewhere and then bring it back. Because you might not be able to pull from the resources that you have right in front of you. And it might be better if you go off and sort of go into a land where you can just, it's a little bit more ripe for the picking, and then come back and live as a king or queen back where you were, and meaning spread the wealth. But yeah, if you're asking me that directly, I would say the first, but the former.
Awesome, thank you. I think maybe time for just one more.
Yeah.
This one's from Monica. I'm sure you've been in the position that you've had to defend yourself, given that you're breaking the ceiling in a field that has historically lost diversity. This happens to a lot of us at CCNY, City College. Many companies filter us out in the hiring process because we're from a public school. Have you been in a position of defending why you're not undeserving of opportunities? And do you have advice on how to navigate these conversations?
I feel like I'm in that fight every single day of my life. And it is so insulting because you know your value. And what I have really found, and this isn't just to make people feel better, this is what I truly have found, is that most people who are putting you in a box are just stuck in one themselves. They have peaked so far back. They don't know any other way. They don't know how to be grand and great. They know how to be real mediocre. And it drives them crazy because they see other people just blossoming right before their eyes. And they see the potential in people and they don't want to be left behind. And so they put their foot out, or they go up there and they repatch the ceiling, or they move the goalpost, or any of that. And so I'm constantly defending, not necessarily defending, but I'm constantly being lobbed those types of things. And I have to decide, is it worth trying to defend, or is it not? Where can that energy be really focused? So I try to look at, what do I have? And I mean, again, it's a daily struggle. So I don't get it right or wrong. I don't get it right all the time. I don't get it wrong all the time, but I do reflect on it. And I think that's important. So I have to decide what is worth my energy, and compared to the energy I'm putting out, what am I going to get if I succeed at this fight? This happens when I'm like literally looking at Twitter and thinking, am I going to sit here and fight with this person who has 5 followers and their profile picture is of an eagle? Am I really going to go ahead and do that? And then you can just take that and just multiply it by when it's in your life, and it's someone stopping you from getting the promotion, or thinking that you're not ready for this big project, or saying that your company is less than because it came from somewhere, certain place. You just go right on past them, right on bypassing that.
Her relentless authenticity to her music taste, which is playing some Janet Jackson, also one of my personal faves. It's been inspiring to watch her journey, and she was an obvious choice when we were thinking about who to invite as a speaker. So with that said, we're all beyond thrilled to have Arlan Hamilton here to talk about her journey, her insights, and her thoughts on the future. We'll leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for Q&A, so go ahead and use that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screens if you have any questions, and we'll do our very best to get to all of them. So now, before I get things started, I'd like to introduce our guest, Arlan Hamilton of venture capitals, who founded Backstage Capital in 2015, a seed stage investment fund based here in LA that invests in underrepresented founders. That includes people of color, women, and LGBTQ plus folks. Arlan made history as the first non-celebrity Black woman to grace the cover of Fast Company. And just this past May, she published her book, It's About Damn Time. It tells her story as a Black gay woman breaking into Silicon Valley and all the lessons that she has learned along the way, of which there are many. Arlan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you for having me and inviting me to be part of this. I really appreciate it, and have love the PayPal, Venmo, honey vibe. We get along very well with you all.
Very happy to hear that. So let's start from the beginning. You've had a lot of lives, a lot of journeys in your life, but we'd love to hear about your journey kind of from the beginning, starting in the music industry to where you are now. You initially wanted to start your own company, and then you decided to start a venture fund instead. What led you to changing your mind?
Well, I started thinking about starting a company right when I turned 30, 31, 39 now. And so had all these lives before that. And one thing that was the same was that I had just been an entrepreneur my whole life. It was from third grade on. It was like the first time I can remember. And didn't really know what to call it. Didn't know what it was, but knew I had this thing. And then when I discovered the startup world, early 30s, that's when I realized, oh, like these are my people. So I was excited about that. I was living in Texas, really, really broke. Excited about that. Not as broke as I would become, though. Oh. still more later on, but I was excited about it. And I said, well, I want to start a company, because I've been starting like projects and little companies. And I even published a magazine that was a print magazine that went out to thousands of people in my 20s, but it still hadn't figured out unit economics, hadn't figured out co-founder dynamic, hadn't figured out a lot of things. And so the startup world seemed very structured to me in a way, and made logical sense to me. And so I wanted to start a company. And in order to start a company, I thought, well, let me do as much research as I can. I know what I want to start, but let me make sure I understand the kind of the rules and the players and how this works. And it was during that research that I came across this information that 90% plus venture of the investment capital, venture capital that goes into startups. So the investment capital and maybe even angel capital at that point went to straight white men in the US. And I'm not straight, white, or a man. So I was like, well, what's going to happen next? It was like, where does that leave me? And it's not that it wasn't so much that I was like upset that I probably wouldn't get funded. I was just so like, I was completely taken away from my personal track. And it was just like saying, that doesn't make sense for any of us, if that's the case. Like, think of all the women I know who are starting companies, or who I have kind of think about they're starting companies. I know them, or I've looked at them, looked at their companies. How is it that they're not getting funded and we're not getting funded? And so it then became something quite different. And it became about disrupting and agitating and hopefully changing in some way the entire system, rather than just my lane in that system.
So somewhat to change gears, but also related to your journey, coming from an outsider into the VC world, I'm sure that, or maybe you didn't, but I assume that you felt some sort of imposter syndrome. It's something that I've definitely felt throughout my career, and I especially feel in tech. And so I know that it's not just me. I know that everyone feels imposter syndrome, but the thing I assume is that it does hit harder for minorities, because our self-doubt is realized in constant reminders of our otherness, both inside the workplace and outside of the workplace. And in your book, It's About Damn Time. I love saying the title of your book, by the way.
You said it as many times as you'd like.
What?
Say it as many times as you'd like.
Yeah. So in About Damn Time, you talk about your experience of self-doubt and the doubt that others express in your capabilities. And then you give advice about how to remain confident and motivated. And the advice you gave, I thought, was incredibly powerful. And I was hoping that you could share that advice here for the people who are joining us, because it is very, very important to harness the superpower of confidence, but it can be difficult in situations where you're not made to feel like you belong. So I'd love to hear.
In the book, I really start to deconstruct and trying to bust the myth of imposter syndrome, because you said I might have had it. I didn't have imposter syndrome when I came into the VC world. I've had it in the past. And the older I get, the less I believe it's a real thing. So you touched on a few things that make the point. I think that I just present to you the idea of what if imposter syndrome is a myth? What if it's not? It's something that someone is actually like kind of secretly putting on gaslighting you with.
Yep.
Because the example I used in the book was I was doing a fireside brunch at an event in Houston a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, and it was a lovely brunch, and it was like seated tables, and it was very everybody in the room was a woman who was an executive at a company, because it was a major event, really put on, really done up. I think the flowers alone cost like $50,000. Like, it was just a really to do thing. And one of the panelists, I was on a panel, and one of the panelists asked the audience, because we were talking about many things, they just said, just show of hands, who has ever felt imposter syndrome? And every single person, no matter what their age was, their race, which type of executive they were, if they were there with their executive, every single person's hand went up. And not only that, like, everybody looked around, like, I can't believe every single person's hand went up. And then it got real. It went from being like this, thing that people kind of ask in situations like that, and you expect, a few hands go up and everybody goes down. Then it got real, because I kind of stopped it, because we were going to move on. I said, look, everybody feels out of place at some point. Everybody feels like they're in over their head at some point. Everybody has that feeling. But think about the people, like Michelle Obama even said it in her documentary on Netflix recently. She's like, the people who are in those rooms that you're trying to get into, that you aspire to, don't even know how they got into those rooms themselves. And all of us have worked with someone, maybe not at this particular company, maybe somewhere else, where you've worked with someone who has a higher position than you do, and you're like, why do they have a higher position than I do? Or you think, I could do that. You're most likely right. So I just don't, I no longer prescribe or subscribe to the imposter syndrome. I just don't let it happen. I don't let myself feel it. I feel like I've met so many people on this journey in venture capital, so many people, so many guys, so many people who have a ton of money, like so much money they'll never be able to spend it. And a lot of these guys out here, man, ooh, I'm glad they have money, because that's about all they have. They have some dollars, but not some cents. Okay, so yeah, that's part of what I think about imposter syndrome.
I think that's super powerful and very important to remember. You talk a little bit about the myth of meritocracy in this society, and it's similar to the myth of imposter syndrome. I think growing up, we think, and I thought, oh, the people who made it, the people who made money were the smartest people. Were the people who worked. So, you think, wow, how did they get there with all of this? They had to do it with intelligence. They had to do it with work ethic. And then once, you get to a certain point in your career and you're looking around the room, you're realizing, like
different paths. It's different paths.
Right, different paths. And there are people who may have, stumbled into something or just are learning it as they go.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Yeah. But everyone kind of feels the same feeling of, how did I get here? And that makes the fact that you feel that way, you've seen other people feel that way, that we're talking about it, that's really what is going to...
Yeah, I have a lot of data to use, not data that I've read, but data that I've collected myself. I've talked to thousands, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, both entrepreneurs and operators, within other companies. And nobody has it figured out, first of all. This is literally no one has it figured out. And I have not, we talk about like race or talk about gender. I have not, so the smartest white person I know is not smarter than the smartest black person I know. Some people actually, I was talking about this yesterday with somebody. They were asking me why do I think like white allies who are liberals like woke, still kind of put you in a certain bucket, or board. And I started thinking about it, and it's like it's really it's that bias. I don't like to say unconscious bias because I feel like it's conscious, but maybe it is a little bit unconscious. It really is where even the people who love you, even the people who think you're amazing, they've been brought up like little white boys in America have Superman from the moment they can remember. Think about how many superheroes they have as examples. How many army generals come in? How many quarterbacks? They get to see these different people. They get to see presidents. All of these things. Now, some of these presidents out here, I mean, don't even think about we have right now. We've had some pretty IQ deficient presidents in the past. Yes, but they're president. So these positions they're in just makes people, it's just they see that. It's like when you get on a plane and you see a black pilot. It's different. Yeah. It's just different. And you're like, well, I hope they got the same training that the white guy, you don't want to be, you're not saying I hope some people are saying I hope they're as smart as the white person. Some people are certainly saying that, but it's just because you haven't seen it over and over again. So I probably can go on a tangent there. So
yeah, no, I'll before I ask my next question, it looks like, sorry, we lost Maria, my co-host, but I have all of our questions, so don't worry, everyone.
She'll be back.
Ask all the questions that Maria and I kind of put together for this. But you just raised a really an interesting point. I saw Black Panther in theaters multiple times. I remember I went to see it, and in the first introduction of the shot of showing Africa and showing Black superheroes, I started crying. And I'm not an emotional person, but I realized I was crying because I just never seen Black superheroes other than Storm on X-Men, played by Halle Berry.
Storm, yeah, and then and anything else would have been like blaxploitation a little bit,
right?
Or,
so we just
or like tongue in cheek,
right? So that's a whole other tangent, but
yeah,
I thought I would bring up. And so kind of next question, and this is specific to the LGBT community because it's Pride Month, and we wanted to ask a question about what unique experiences do you believe that queer people bring to the workplace that can be a business advantage, or how do you think queer people approach business opportunities that are different than some of the other groups or underrepresented minorities that you work with? Because I think we talk about women and Black people in VC and Latin people in VC, and I'd like to focus a little bit in on the LGBT community and how they are perceived in the industry and what you've done to support that community.
So there's several questions in there. I think I'll probably have a boring answer to the main question about how how queer people view things. I think we just view things like we view things, like, just like almost any underrepresented, underestimated group, we just kind of have our own lived experiences individually. So I don't know if there's a grand swath that I can say we all feel or think this way. When I think of the queer community at large, I automatically, this may be right or wrong, but I automatically just start thinking of very creative people that I know a lot of them, and us and me, creative and optimistic. And there's this is for the most part. Again, you can't just say one thing about everybody and it just covers it. No. Like, this is how Black women are, But that's what I think of when I think of the queer community, and certainly resilient and creative in their resilience. So all of that kind of matches up. So if it's like with almost any underrepresented group, any group that has felt like they are the only in the room, or they're kind of singled out for some reason or another, that person has figured out how to survive. And some of it is traumatic and some of it is not great, but they've figured out nonetheless how to survive and how to go. And I want to be around and surrounded by people who can figure stuff out and who can hack their way. And that's what I look for. That's why I invest in LGBTQ people, That's why I invest in people of color and women, because I feel it's the right thing to do, and because I feel like there's so much out there to find, but also as a Sharky investor, because I want to invest in people who are going to find a way to be creative and turn money, treat money a certain way, and treat opportunity a certain way, and find opportunity in a very special way. And I probably should talk more about that in general, because it's kind of gotten pigeonholed into, just saying, diversity is lucrative. But let's really break down why. You really have people who, and especially if you have like intersectional situations,
right?
Ooh, like just be a gay Black woman for a day in this country. Gay Black woman for a day. I am that, and I still, when I said it out loud, I was like, I feel for y'all. I mean, it is so many things at once. But if you can survive and even thrive, and you're these things, and you want to start a business, or you've started one, and that business makes money, and that business has impact, and that business is doing something interesting, wow, you've just landed in this beautiful place where I want to take a look at what you're doing, because to me, you have a lot of, you have stacked the deck in your favor a lot. And yes, that sort of thinking is very different than the standard VC norm.
Right.
But I'm not the standard VC norm.
No, you are not. I think what's interesting is when I was going through these questions and thinking through them with Maria, there's what's common in all of these underrepresented groups when it comes to VC and getting the funding and the building the relationships. Each of these groups is not trusted to deliver this idea that will be lucrative and make money. Black people are definitely, all of them lack access to funding for a variety of reasons, but it feels like there's this lack of trust that if a Black person comes into the room and presents one idea, it's not going to be seen with the same level of validity or credibility as if say a straight white man. Similar, and I guess this is a question for you, is that, is that issue of trust similar across underrepresented minorities in this space, or do different groups face different challenges?
Yeah, I would imagine that at different times, different groups face it. Like right now, I mean, we kind of have to triage.
Right. That's what
our support. Right now, Black Lives Matter all day, every day. And queer lives matter all day, every day. And these different lives matter all day, every day.
Right.
Well, right now we need to triage and say, well, we gotta put our arms around Black lives. We got to. Everywhere across. So that's one thing. Another thing is like I try, and I'm not saying you are doing this. I'm saying this is where what I do sometimes. I try not to play the oppression Olympics, because if I had to measure, is it harder to be a woman, or is it harder to be Black, or is it harder to be gay? And who is feeling worse, or who's getting the shorter end of this stick, and this and that? It kind of, there's no real answer to that, because it really is like, I mean, this comes up a lot, especially intersectionally. It comes up a lot. Like some people think that the plight of queer people is not as important or as strong as the plight of Black people, and then I'm protecting both sides, and I'm just like, why do we have to? Is it 40% and 60%? Is that okay too? Like, is it all right? And can I be these two things at once? Is that cool with everybody? But at the end of the day, honestly, like the fact that any of us have to suffer because of who we were born as is a shame. And whatever that is, we should always just, in my opinion, I don't like the word should unless I say in my opinion, we should kind of just optimize for being an ally across, like in any circumstance. How can I be an ally? And then I have these really great conversations with straight white men after I go and do a speech or something, and they're like in the audience, and they didn't quite get out the door before I sat down, so they couldn't quite sneak out yet. and they're just being introduced to me. And then after 45 minutes, they're like, oh, okay, you're not here to yell at me. Okay, I get it. Okay. And then, inevitably somebody will come up to me and say, look, I'm straight white. Man, I try to do everything I can to be a good person. I'm not trying to put anybody else down. Where do you see me in all of this? And, everybody has gone through something. Everybody's gone through something or is going through something. And I'm just trying to get us back to like humanity. Like, can we all be in a level playing field? That's
a great transition to my next question before I get into some VC specific topics. But I have never talked about race so much in my entire life than I have talked about race in the past month. Yep. And it's been exhausting and invigorating and inspiring, and I feel super energized. It's confusing and frustrating all at once. There's so many emotions. Yeah. And I'm very happy at the end of the day that we are talking about these things because it's about damn time.
Yeah.
So as someone who is steeped in having to talk about these issues and living the life that you live as the person you are, how do you have advice on how to gain comfort or fluency in approaching these topics with white people or allies or really anyone else that is not in your community to make it, constructive? How have you done it? How have you entered rooms with, as you said, straight white men and talked about issues of race and made them not about necessarily feeling comfortable, right? It's because I think we need to sit in the discomfort a little bit.
Definitely.
But like to make some progress, to change a way of thinking or to keep your job, end the conversation with your job intact. That's another one.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying I am very unemployable or have been in the past. So I recognize that some of the things that I say don't play as well in a corporate world, corporate setting.
Yes.
But I also know that you got one life to live, and you can't wear a costume every day for the rest of your life. It's not sustainable. So there is a point where you have to come to work yourself. I also will say before I answer more, I wish we could kind of do this race relations, not PR, but like deep dive, like in shifts. You know what I mean? Like we all get together and say, okay, you take the morning shift, you get some sleep. It is around the clock, right? It's good. It's almost mixed messages, and it's hard to really explain. I literally just had this experience right before this conversation. And I maybe somebody here. Oh no, this is a private event. So this is not a public event, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just had this experience in a public event that I hold every Wednesday for my book. And it's a mastermind book club sort of thing. And anybody can come to it. And about 150 or 200 people come to it every Wednesday, and then people watch it. And it's a lot going on in 1 hour. And there are and I have a couple of my friends and teammates who are in the room who kind of watch everybody to make sure there's nothing weird going on. You never know, people pop in. And I started getting feedback last week from a couple of Black women who said, when you put us in the breakout rooms, this white man and this white woman, like last time, they just trying to take over the room. And they're here with your book. So they have read it. They subscribe to it, but they still do it. They still do the thing. And today we tried to kind of curb that. We had a conversation about it openly. So this is getting to answer your question, is being open about it and being genuine and being sincere and I come to things like this really with such an intention of wanting people to get along. And, that pisses some people off on the fringes. They're like, you're being too nice, you're being too whatever. But I'm like, man, I want it to work. I really want it to work. So I kind of explained what was going on. And I said, okay, now we got that information. This is what we're going to do. We're going to be in bigger groups so we can have more people involved. And then you're going to look out for each other. And I'm going to pop into groups and whatever. Mm-hmm. So I popped into the first meeting. Everything was beautiful. I popped into the second meeting. Everything was gorgeous. It was just like, exactly the prompt we were talking about. I get to like my fifth or sixth meeting, and there is a white woman, and she's on the verge of tears, and she's saying over and over again, tell me what I'm supposed to do to help you. And there's a Black woman who's saying, nope, I'm not going to tell you. She said, read a book. And so I popped in and I said, okay, that's what I say. I said, I don't know what else is going on, but I'm going to go ahead and interject. And I think to the white woman, I said, what she's trying to say is that you asked the question, but you're not listening to her answer. And there are so many books right now you can read. There's so much you can learn online. There's so many places you could ask, instead of asking right here to take over her time. You could say, does anybody in the room have any availability to talk to me over the next month or so, or email with me or any of that. And if not, I'll keep looking and keep trying. All of these things, I gave her this thing, and then she just burst into tears. And so someone reached out to her on Twitter later, like just an hour ago, and she's like, what you did in that room was the definition of white fragility. You literally turned that into an attack on yourself. You started crying because you felt like you were being whatever. And I mean, I was there, so I know nobody was coming at her. I was the nicest person I could be, but it's almost like a mechanism or something. It's like a thing that some people have. And a lot of people were commenting to me, like who are my friends who were in the room, and they were just like texting me after. And they're like, man, you handled that well. And how do you do that? Like, there's 150 people, 160 people at any given time. And you just got to think about everybody's position and life and agenda and beliefs. And there's no way to get it perfect.
Yeah.
So that lady, I don't know, I'll have to talk to her more to understand if she is someone who is going to change her thinking. But in general, I wish I remembered this woman's name. She was an Asian woman, and I can't remember her name. She had the best advice. She used to do like D&I for different companies. And she would come in and she said, like, she would have people come up to her and say, after she did a conversation, they would say, you really called me out, you really made me uncomfortable. And she would say, okay, fair enough, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but go home, think about what we talked about, and if you're still uncomfortable tomorrow, tell me, right? And then some of them would just never bring it up again, but some of them would come back and say, I'm still upset. And she was like, okay, that 24 hours, that 12 hours, multiply that by 1,000. That's what the person that I was making the point for has gone through. You can be uncomfortable for a day. And those types of things are really interesting. And I find that if you say it, if you talk to people one-on-one, or you talk to them with a intention of, if you have an intention about why you're talking to them, they'll hear you. And some of them won't hear you, and you got to kind of move on.
Yeah.
We don't have time for that. Like, every day we get a little older, right? Like, every day we lose a little time, right? So we don't have time to be everybody's savior, fixer, educator, cloak I am married to a white woman, and thankfully she's 100%. Zero has tried to make me feel like I need to teach her. 0%. But even some of my white friends are reaching out to me and just needing so much from me. And I'm just like, I understand you want to show me you care right in this moment, but you understand it's like, I don't know. And I don't know what the perfect answer is. I don't know what the perfect answer is.
That's the hardest part, especially I'm in communications, right? So to have to communicate on this issue without ever having access to what the perfect answer is has been interesting, both personally and professionally. So I think just the idea that you've kind of put forward that this is not going to be a perfect conversation, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation, and this is a conversation that needs to also be there's an element of self-educating that needs to go into it. I think those are really important tenets for how we move forward with conversations with everyone about all of these issues. I think Black is top of mind, obviously, given what's going on. And yeah, I think there's a Robin DiAngelo who wrote White Fragility, although there's actually a recent Washington Post article about the issues and challenges with that book, but there's a challenge, everyone's challenging everything right now. So
as we should.
Yeah, right. So she did say once that, you know, and it doesn't go just for white or black and can be for the LGBTQ community or for anyone who is a minority, is that in a society where they make it so uncomfortable for people to talk about race, that is a form, again, of kind of this underlying oppression, right? Because if you make it so uncomfortable to talk about race, then no one talks about race. And then we continue doing the same things we've always done because we can't talk about it. And so now we're talking about it and we're going to go through it as we talk about it. But something that I've been trying to do is give people the grace to make mistakes in conversations with me. And as you said, to have the intent of understanding good, that people are coming from a good place. And, you know, to not, I can't do it all the time, every day, every hour, but to at least kind of engage in conversation when I can. So yeah, thank you for that. And I'm going to actually switch gears quickly because we only have a couple more minutes until I want to.
We lost your co-host for good, huh?
It seems like we did, which that's a, you know, this is being recorded, so I will send it to her. That's too bad. But she may join for the Q&A. Hopefully she gets to set up I think her internet went out. So Maria, we miss you. So I just want to ask a question about a recent tweet of yours where you, it was heard around the world, the VC world, infamous, around setting up a fund for straight white men.
Yes.
And this is about creating Black founder-focused funds, and it went viral. And I wanted to have you share a little bit about your perspective on these initiatives.
So my tweet said that I was setting up a $13 fund for white men, for straight white men in tech, and it was going to be 50 cents at a time, and that it would come with mentoring and exposure, I think, from me, mentoring from me, of course. And I think there's a thing about Maria and
she's gonna try and get her internet back. But
it just popped up. So I wrote that, and at the time I had just been in TechCrunch, and I think of Bloomberg a little bit after that, but I had been in a lot of this like places where I've been screaming on my own podcast, like these little crumbs that people are putting out because people are protesting in the street. Okay, you that's good. Well, that's today. What's happening tomorrow? Like, are we going to get 10 times that tomorrow, or what was that just a down payment? Like, and I was just saying that, and some people thought I was like calling out certain, like very specific other people who are doing initiatives. I'm calling out. I've been working on this fund and in these funds for 9 years. It took me almost 9 years to raise $7 million of the dollars to put in. That's the same amount of money that some companies just get as a round of funding in their early days. It took me 9 years, 25, 50, 100K at a time, $1 million no's every single day to get that amount of money. And not only that, I'm seeing thousands of companies by underrepresented founders. I'm investing. I'm writing checks. I'm spending my own money. I'm doing everything. My whole savings is in Backstage. You couldn't be more invested than I am in this. And every day, the insult to injury is that we have to also explain why we're viable. Like Black people, our founders have to also explain why they're viable, why they're even worth looking at from a 27-year-old white man who went to MIT or went to Stanford or Cornell, who has his feet on his desk, is working with other people's money that he didn't have to raise, and he got this gig because he got this gig. I don't know if he got it, how he got it. He might have got it on merit. Good for him, but he's still the description. And the insult to injury is that person has the right somehow to ask double major Black woman, I'm thinking of someone in particular, if she really went to the school she went to, and how she's going to be able to run this company, because he's not used to seeing her as a CEO. So you're going to put out crumbs. I'm going to call you out on it. So I said, hey, if everybody's over here putting out these nonprofit Make-A-Wish Foundation initiatives with a 1/100,000th of their money, I'm going to go ahead and do the same. I'm going to do a $13 fund. And maybe by doing this, by saying this, you can see how ridiculous you sound when you say it to me. So I'm saying it to the whole industry. I'm saying it to the billion-dollar funds left and right that made their money on the backs. The only reason venture capital exists, the only reason they have the ability to have the money is because of Black people 400 years ago. Like, it's just literally that. And it's because of Latinx people today.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way. So don't use our money to tell me you can't invest in me. That's where I was coming from with that. I was doing it though, less militant. I was doing it very tongue in cheek. And, you know, people popped in. There was a bunch of white guys who popped into the comments and they were like, oh, cool. You know, they got the joke. They got the joke. And it was sort of like, I was just venting. And then it turned into something much bigger because people are like,
well, it is Twitter.
It is Twitter. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask one last question. And before I do, anyone who has a question, please use the Q&A feature. If you send in your question, I'll be able to read it out loud to Arlan. So you can start seeding those now. And then I'm going to ask another question about what you're doing in the VC space, because I find it fascinating. And we're having actually a lot of these conversations on the PayPal side of things.
Well, PayPal, you all PayPal put out, what is it?
530 million.
Yeah, 530 million. We put that, as soon as that happened, we put it in our newsletter.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah. And I think I'm actually somewhat new to PayPal, right? Because I came from the Honey acquisition, and this has been one of the first kind of projects I'm working on. And I have to say, I've been really impressed, and I'm not just saying that because I have some PayPal people over here joining this conversation, but I've been really impressed with the depth of the conversation that we're having about funding in Black and minority communities. And we're asking those same questions about how, it feeling like a handout sometimes when people are like, okay, we'll invest in this Black business. Here's here's some funding.
Yeah, I had to stop myself from putting up a middle finger when you said that.
Right, exactly.
I really literally had to.
It can feel almost like charity, how I've seen it expressed in the past. And that's not what this should be about. This is about people who are amazing founders doing amazing work, and we should be investing in that, period. So you are doing something unique with Backstage Crowd for non-accredited investors. Can you tell us about that initiative and how to remove those traditional gatekeepers?
Yeah, so it's actually for accredited and non-accredited. So anybody can join backstagecrowd.com right now, or in 15 minutes. Anybody can join backstagecrowd.com. And what I'll try to not take too long, but it's an investing syndicate. And it's kind of exciting. It's kind of funny because I really started Backstage with the syndicate. It just didn't go anywhere. And when I couldn't make it go anywhere, then that's when I started raising money. I mean, that's when I went back to like just raising money one person at a time and doing that. But I wanted it to start with the crowd. So for our non-accredited, so you're accredited if you make $200,000 a year as a one person, or $300,000 a year with your spouse, or you make $1 million, you have $1 million or more in your net worth, not including your main home. And that's in the United States. And there's other ways to judge it outside of the United States. And that is not me, that is the SEC, and that's regulations. And I've also spoken to the SEC about changing those regulations and those situations. Like, I don't believe in that, but it is what it is today. And something's being done about it because people have been talking about it for years. So anyway, that's how you're accredited. That's how you know you're accredited or not. For those who are accredited, which is a lot of people in tech, have gigs that are like, $200K, $230K, and they're not necessarily going to be able to go and put $100,000 into a company or get into any kind of venture fund, but they can put $1,000 down on a company to invest in them and be part of this, right? So with our syndicate, we negotiate deals. A lot of them are with our current portfolio companies. So we've seen them for years. Some of them are with new companies that we really, really believe in. And we'll negotiate, okay, that company is raising, like the one we have right now, the company is raising $5 million. But our first investment was so many years ago, was so far back that we've already have a return on our investment.
Okay.
So they're already doing, we're like, I don't know, it's at least 2.5x at this point. just in 2 years. And then next year they're going to do even more. And I can't say much about it because it's accredited. But we negotiate. Well, can we do like 500K of that? Can we come in on that 5 million? Because you're doing that with some major funds. We're used to investing 25K to 100K and like scrappily doing so, like finding that capital. Now we're able to say, well, can we put in $500,000? Can we put in $1 million? And then we take our terms that we negotiated. I negotiated some incredible terms for our first deal. Incredible. I'm just going to say it. Like ridiculous terms. We negotiate that. I'm putting in personal money. I'm putting in money from another fund that I manage out of Mark Cuban's wealth. Mm-hmm. I'm putting in everything that I can. And I'm saying, do you want to also add on to this? And you can do so for like $1,000 minimum. And so AngelList is one that's most known for this, doing this, mm-hmm. syndicates. Mm-hmm. And you make the decision. You look at the deal. We put the deal behind a wall. You look at the deal. You look, you do your own research. You talk to your people, whatever. And then you say, yeah, I'll put $2,000. Let's see what happens. Because it can all go to zero. 8 out of 10 companies are going to fail. 8 out of 10 companies are going to fail. So it could all go to zero. So you never put down more than what you can afford to never see again. Think of it as a lottery ticket or a trip to Vegas. If you can do that, cool. If you can't, do not play. Yeah.
I'm still scared of that.
Yeah. Don't do it if you can't, and that's okay. You can just observe it and just watch and then you might see something, 6 or 7 deals in and say, you know what, that's fintech. And that's also, they're doing marketing on fintech. Like I know that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. And I believe in that. Let me go ahead and go there. But otherwise it's like, so then you have up to 250 people who can do this for each deal. So you have 250 people who put in an average of, our average right now is about $3,000.
Oh.
So we could raise if we wanted to a lot. So we're aiming for, I can't say too much more about it, but we're aiming to put 250K checks, 500K checks, $1 million checks into these deals over the next 18 months. That's for accredited. Mm-hmm. So you can be part of that, just see how we operate on the inside. And that makes us very powerful. And if you think about it too, like, a couple of years ago, I was trying to put together this fund that invests $1 million at a time into Black women. It was very widely talked about how it didn't come together. I'm going to be able to put $1 million into a Black woman-led company soon. I don't know exactly when, but soon with the Senate.
Right.
So it's like half a dozen in one, 6 in the other. I don't care how it comes together. We're making it happen. Now, for non-accredited, if you don't fit that description of the financial profile, which I did not 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we have deals that are on platforms that do public raises that are part of ours. So we are funneling people to those deals. And some deals we're leading, but most of them we're just funneling because they're in our portfolio. So a Republic.co or a WeFunder or Seed Invest will have a deal up. And just like Kickstarter, you put money in it, but instead of getting a t-shirt, you have a little bit of equity in the company. And those are like $100 minimums.
Oh, okay. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that.
My mom and my brother both invested in the first deal that we said as non-accredited because neither of them are accredited. So my mom and my brother, I just did a video where I taught them how to get into one of the platforms to make their first investment.
That is so cool. I feel like investment seems so out of reach for me. I remember, kind of hearing about friends doing it, and I thought it was something that you only could do if you had tons of money and tons of influence. So that's really awesome to hear. And I'm gonna move over to questions. I know we have about 10 minutes left, and I definitely want to get you to answer some of these.
Okay.
The first question came in, and it asks, in your book, you talk about being underestimated, not underrepresented. Can you talk more about that distinction?
Yes. So it's not underrepresented because it's a fact that we are underrepresented. It's just a mathematical fact. We are underrepresented as opposed to what we should be, how we should be represented in any group in tech. But underestimated changes things. Underestimated is like when I talk to an investor and I'm talking about underrepresented founders, like you said before, some people think, well, they're not good enough, or they're subpar. Mm-hmm. When you say underestimated, what you're saying is to a savvy investor is, wait a minute, there's something that people are not seeing about them. there's a potential that they can reach, it changes things. And we have simply been you can call it overlooked. You can call it oversimplified. You can call it this and that and the other. But one of the main things is underestimated. And now we get to show them.
Right. Another question came in from Andrea from Honey, who said it's a pretty common statement for VCs to say they, quote, invest in founders versus ideas. I've definitely heard that. But can you speak a little more about what you look for in founders as an indicator of what is a good investment?
Sure. I look for people who stir me, then they can stir me by just being a powerhouse of, like when I say powerhouse, actually some of the people I'm thinking of are like the shyest people ever. So it's not like they have figured out this beautiful art of speaking, or they walk into a room and they're just the life of the party. I just mean that their vision and their execution and what they want to see the world look like is so compelling that I want to be on that journey with them. And there are people that walk into a room or walk into a Zoom and give you that, and I want that. Other things I look for are just like the ability to take constructive criticism and to do something with it. Taking it, the first part of that, taking it is hard for a lot of people. And I'm someone who...
It's hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard for me too. Like if you get me at first, like I'm going to be like, nope, for a lot of ways, unless I'm already like settled in, okay, I'm going to be open to whatever anybody says right now. If you catch me the wrong time, it's defensive, because that's, what we have to do. But somebody described this to me. They said that it's because I'm alpha. They said that you're kind of made to protect. So you're like this. But like that ability to take it, even if it takes you a day or two to come back and say, okay. And there are some founders who I wouldn't say yes to at the beginning just because you don't necessarily need to. And then they come back like 6 months later and they're like, not only did I think about what you said, but I've done other stuff that you didn't even think about. This other stuff that is just like, and I'm like, wow, that would have taken like somebody else 2 years to do, because you were so focused on it and you were so intent on the product being the thing and not it being about ego and all these different things, I also want to, the older I get, the more I want to work with people who are working on things that are life-changing, or at least changing the quality of life for somebody. Yeah. And it's not gonna interest me as much to just, it's not that it can't be invested in, but like something like, the next photo app, it's just not gonna make me as interested. Yeah, there's more, but that's
that's great. I thought this was kind of a fun one, but Jordan from Honey asks, you do a lot of talks. Are there any questions that you really dread that people ask about, whether it's VC or your background?
I don't like a question if it's like completely open-ended and it's about like, tell me your story. Like your whole story, because that happens in interviews or in talks, and I'm just like, I had to write a whole book about it and I still haven't covered it. I don't know where you like I was.
How do you solve racism in VC? How do you solve racism in general? Yeah.
Oh man, nobody had dared to ask me that. I think I had to walk out.
No, luckily I haven't.
Like Viola Davis. Say that again.
I was going to say I haven't really seen that question asked, but I as working in comms and doing some of these talks, you're never supposed to ask a super open-ended question.
Super. Or they don't ask a question at all. They say something, and you're like, yeah, that is a statement. That is accurate. And you're just thinking, okay, where's the question? And they're just like, they just stop. Like, am I supposed to, are you going to ask? That is, then that's just more from my interviewing on my podcast, Your First Million. I've done a lot of interviewing over the years, and it's just one of my pet peeves. It's not so much a terrible thing. Everybody does it.
Right. So with the 5 minutes left, I'm going to probably have two more questions. With everything that's happening, this moment that we're living in, where we're talking a lot about race, people are realizing or coming to terms with the structural racism that exists or the inequities that exist for Black people and other minorities, but specifically for Black people. We're seeing some funds open up. We're seeing a lot of action in the past 3 weeks. Someone asked, what do you hope that the tech and VC industry will look like in the next few years? And I'm kind of adding, based on what we're seeing in this moment. Maybe it can be maybe what your hope is based on what
sure. What my hope is in 5 years is that it's just so equitable. It's just so like, let me put it to you like this. And this is some people are gonna get me and some people are gonna walk away only half getting me and they're gonna get me wrong. But the day a Black woman can raise $100 million and then fall flat on her face and then be fine in the eyes of the industry is actually, we've moved on. We've gotten somewhere. We have so much we're supposed to prove as Black women and others. We're supposed to prove, we're supposed to be 10 times better to be looked at as equal. And even then they move the goalpost. Man, how many times have we had the goalpost moved? How many times? For all of that nonsense to be you're kind of considered a dinosaur if you still do that to people, that would be really special, because then that means on the outside, on the surface, that means like my nieces and my nephews didn't even have to go through it. That's all Pollyanna. That's all I wish and hopes and everything. That's only 5 years from now. But I think we can get close to that. I think we can get to, even more so realistically, we can get to a point where I've been saying for 3 years at least that they're like that this 10-year period. So this is 7 years out. Within that period, we're going to have so many Black millionaires and billionaires, you can't even stand it. And so that's where things are going to, like, all this work is towards that.
That's from your mouth to the universe's ears there, that we can have a Black female founder fail with that amount of investment. It's actually a conversation, funny enough, that I just had with some PayPal folks before. This conversation was the fact that failing in VC and tech is seen as a badge of honor. But when you are a minority, you're not allowed to fail, and you're not given the opportunity to do so, or at least you may feel that way because you're representing. No,
you're not. You're feeling it right. You're not giving people. Someone told me who was actually woke, and a friend said to me early on, but I had to tell him how terrible it was when he said this to me as a white man who had invested in my fund. And he said, all right. I said, you got to do 10X this fund, or you're not going to be considered, you're going to be considered a failure if you don't 10X this fund. And I said, wait a second. I just looked at the Kaufman report, and they said that 85% of all venture funds return 1.2 or less X. So if I do 2X or 3X, I'm doing better than 85% of all venture funding. You want me to do 10X, so I'm a failure? Really? If I 6X this fund? Really? He said, absolutely. That's how the world is going to see you. That's how this world is going to see you. And it wasn't like, Coach Carter, come on in, let me get you ready for this, what you're going to face in 10 years and make you a whatever. It was like, he was so serious. And he was so ready to be the person to call me a failure if I didn't do it. So it's not imagined.
Right.
We're set up to fail, because any success we have, they're going to change that mile marker. And they're going to say you failed. They're going to say you failed. That's why a year ago, I'm all in the press saying that I failed, that my fund fell through when I was in the middle of raising it. I have been around so many white men raising funds who are raising funds left and right. It takes them a few months. I've never, ever, still to this day, seen a headline that said they didn't raise the fund because they hadn't raised it yet. Can I take it? Man, they move that goalpost. So knowing that and knowing those rules, it becomes funny. That's just entertainment. The sidelines is entertainment. When you're like when Brene Brown talks about being in the arena, like when you're on the field and you're really playing the game, the sidelines become your entertainment. That's noise over there.
That is a great way to kind of conclude this conversation. I know we just reached the hour mark.
Yes.
And so I know that we had a couple more questions, but you've covered really every topic and theme we wanted to go through today. So I just want to do a big plug for your book for those who haven't read it. It's About Damn Time, came out in May. It's awesome. There's so many lessons in there that are really actionable and very important for what we're currently kind of going through. And so I don't know, it's like the perfect timing on this book drop, Arlan, with this title. It's like you kind of knew it was going to happen. It's pretty amazing.
I wish it wasn't happening. I wish a lot of things weren't happening, but man, yeah, I had no idea when I was writing this that this would be the climate.
Right. But at the end of the day, I think it's good that it's happening, that we're having these conversations, because we weren't before. And so I just want to thank you for joining us. Do you have any last thoughts or words?
I just want to thank you all. I appreciate your time. I know how valuable time is these days, and I think I call it like I see it. If y'all stumble, I'm gonna say it out loud. So, but I do really appreciate the 530 million. I think that's what we're talking about. As soon as it came out on Twitter, I said, "This is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about."
Well, we may be giving you a call.
Give me a call.
Get some insight from you.
I would love to. We talk to PayPal a lot. Have PayPal, honey, all of y'all call me. I have many, many ideas for you.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to Zoom meet you. And thank you to everyone.
Time. It's about damn time. Say it with me. It's about damn time. A fireside chat. Marsha, please take it away and let everybody know who you have with you right now.
Don't leave the room. I don't want Candid to leave the room. Because when I told Candid, when she said, Marsha, I'm gonna sign up for the event because I can't wait and I'm excited. You got Arlan Hamilton there. And I said, well, I'll do you one better. How about you host the event alongside me, right? And then I'll give you a second. So I want to allow you this moment. So I'm going to introduce Arlan, and I'm like, ooh, look at my face. I'm going to let you hang out here just for 2 seconds, Scooter. Do you mind? All right, well, I introduce Arlan and bring her on stage, okay? So we are here at the Fireside Chat. It's about damn time, like Candid said. I'm going to introduce and bring to the stage Arlan Hamilton. She built a venture capital fund from the ground up while homeless. She is the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital, a fund that is dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high potential founders who are people of color, women, and or LGBT. She started from scratch in 2015. Backstage has now raised more than $10 million and invested in more than 130 startup companies led by underestimated founders. In 2018, Arlan co-founded Backstage Studio, which launched 4 accelerator programs for underestimated founders in Detroit, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and London. Arlan was featured on the cover of Fast Company magazine in October of 2018 as the first Black woman, non-celebrity, to ever do so. And her new book, It's About Damn Time. Can someone, I got the team, the dream team. It's About Damn Time, comes out. It's already out. And it is on Penguin Random House's business imprint. And it is currently available for you guys. Guys, welcome to the main stage, Arlan Hamilton.
Hello. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. Really appreciate being here and so good to see you.
So fantastic to see you. Arlan, allow me just 2 seconds to introduce you to my host for the past 2 days. Super fan of yours. She is a business educator. She is entrenched in learning about entrepreneurship and educating young, underestimated and underrepresented communities as well. So I wanted to give Candid this moment to say hello to you, even though we're not in person, but this is her time to go.
Hello, Candid. How are you?
Hi, Arlan. I just want to say I'm doing good, thank you. I just want to say, and not to be all mushy, but you are someone that not as I want to aspire to be as far as investing in businesses, because seeing you, I see me, you know, you dress how you want to dress, you are who you are unapologetically. And early in my career, I was just like, oh, I need to look more professional, or I need to dress more feminine and, you know, play the role. And learning your story about, you know, being homeless, because I've been there, your relationship with your mom is tight, and I lost my mom, and just, you know, just knowing a lot about you, it was just like, you know what? It's only up from here, kid. Like,
Yes. Yes.
and at some point, you know, I want to grow and invest in, you know, black businesses and, you know, gay and lesbian businesses, and just, you know, continue what you've done, and just, you know there's people out here that follow you and that admire you and that want to, you know, continue your legacy, even though we're not your children.
Yeah. Well, see, I have a no cry on Saturday rule, so I'm not about to cry, but I'm tearing
No,
up.
no crying, no crying. That's all I want
Yeah.
the people sure to see.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to meet you, Candid. I'd love to learn more about your work, and I appreciate Marsha introducing us, and I appreciate your, you know, just continue your resilience, and you're going to do it. I mean, what I feel like anybody who has that story and has that resilience is going to lap my work, you know, is just going to go right past me. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And ladies, enjoy your fireside chat. I'm taking notes, and
Cool.
You know, there's no dry eye in the room. So yes, we all have the no cry on Saturday. And that, you know, I will tell you, I didn't think to do that until this very moment, because I have spoken to Candid and I know how much she's a fan of yours. And I personally, you know, we're not gonna cry. I said the last 2 days, people, don't try to make me cry, and I won't go into it. But you are a person that I've been wanting you on this platform probably like over a year. And I said, she's too big for me, right? She's too big. And I've been following you. And there was a time where I knew that I wanted to create a company that will be investable by an investor, right? And I wanted something where I could go on Shark Tank. And then you came on the scene, and I was like, forget the tanks. I want a VC like her to looking at me and who sees me to invest in me. So I just want to let everyone know how inspiring your story is, and let's get into it. You ready to get into it?
I would love to. Yes, yes. And hi, everybody. Thanks for investing in yourself on this Saturday morning for some of us, and early afternoon for the rest.
I have, like I said, followed you for the longest and didn't even know, you know, people, you got to go for the ask. Didn't even know how accessible you were to the average person until you wrote a book. And I like to read and I like to learn more about people. And when you wrote your book and came out with your book, I'm in. I bought the book. Then I bought the audio, and then I started listening, and then I can hear. I haven't been 100% down your path, but I hear me in a lot of the things that you write in your book, and I relate to it so much. So following you on social media and halfway stalking you, like many people do, and like, you know, trying to learn as much as I can, I wanted to really get into your ideas about leadership. You talk about the importance for the industry to change their mindset and start investing in underrepresented, underestimated women, LGBT, all of the sectors that don't look like white, regular Mark Zuckerbergs, right?
Right.
And you're leading the way. Was it your vision that you would be this leader in this time, or were you just doing you?
Oh, no, I never thought about it like that. So we called it Backstage for a reason. The idea, though, was that we would be a case study. So the idea when I was starting out was, will people are saying that the companies that are viable don't exist and the founders don't exist if they're a person of color or if they're a woman, etc. So let me find them, and because I've already seen so many, let me go ahead and invest in some of them as a sample, just a sampling of it. And then I'll build a portfolio, and I'll amplify that portfolio. And that's why it was very important from day one to put the person's photograph on our website rather than their logo, like so many funds do. And I'll put that out there. And then we in fact call our portfolio companies our headliners to our Backstage. And then holistically, the portfolio and finding the companies and how we did it, the process could be a case study for others to replicate. And it has become that. And it has been replicated and repeated and all of that. But I never thought, oh, I'm going to be on the cover of Fast Company, or I'm going to be someplace where people are, coming to me for expertise on things. Never thought that. I thought I can talk about it, and I can write about it as much as till the cows come home. But if I don't show it and prove it, people may not be able to understand what I'm talking about. And I wanted to prove it so that other people with far more money and more means could replicate it.
And we talked about some of that yesterday in proving concepts, becoming case studies for your business, right, before it truly explodes. Another topic we touched upon yesterday and spoke a lot about, which is in your book, it's about damn time. I sing that title all the time, and I have a t-shirt. I should have wore it, but I wanted to be cute today than the t-shirt.
Right.
One of the topics you cover in your book is overcoming imposter syndrome, right? And what when we find certain people at a certain level and we look at them as great leaders, we forget they're like human, that they bleed, they suffer from the same challenges that we go through. So I love what you wrote about imposter syndrome, and I just want to read a little bit. You said, while I know it affects women at greater rates than men, but when you said it affects underestimated people, that kind of blew me away, because as a person who works with women and all the talks I do are about women, I never really thought of us as underestimated. I never brought that factor into my discussions. And when you said underestimated, that speaks volumes to me, because they look at women as if we can't achieve something. So they impart their negative beliefs and negative thoughts on us, right? Can you share the story with everyone about that period you wrote about in the book?
Which
estimated.
Which story in particular? Okay. Well, I'll talk about just imposter syndrome in general, and it's a myth to me. For me, it's like you say, well, I have imposter syndrome because I don't feel like I'm supposed to be in this role, or I got promoted too quickly, or I don't know if I'm supposed to be at this job or in this room because everybody else knows so much more. Sometimes people have it when they're at school. Sometimes people have it at a conference. When somebody, like, you ever at a conference and somebody will say a phrase or an acronym, they'll say, yeah, we just got the BTR ready for the STR, and you'll look around and you'll say, or you're in a meeting and you'll say, I don't know what that term means. I'm not supposed to be here because I don't know enough. Well, to me, it's like, everybody's still figuring it out, no matter who they are, no matter if they just started that day or they're the CEO of the company, and you see them getting in a fancy car and driving home to a fancy place. Everybody's still trying to figure it out, because we're all flawed and we're all human and we're all learning on this journey. And so this idea of imposter syndrome, I think, is put upon, more so than others, I think it's put upon women. I think it's put upon people of color. I think that it's put upon Black people. I think it's put upon us as if, it's almost a projection from other
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
What they think of themselves, they put on us because they want to make that gap between the power play even longer and further apart. So if I can convince you subconsciously a little bit that you're not supposed to be here, then you won't see that I'm not supposed to be here
Yeah.
because I don't know what I'm doing. And I think so that's part of it, and so you get to learn about that. You learn about yourself over time.
So what the story I was talking about from the book, I went back in, was I'm gonna paraphrase it, the main stage versus the breakout session. That story was everything. Can you walk us through that feeling from the with the stage hand or the audio lady?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was supposed to speak at this. Well, I was supposed to speak at this event in LA, and I live in Los Angeles. And I didn't go. I went by myself. It was the first time I think I went by myself to an event in a long time, just because it was in my hometown, and it seemed like it was low key, So I went by myself, and I go into the room where I'm supposed to speak, and this is truly the room I'm supposed to speak. And it's actually, I mean, it's not small. It's like 100 seats lined up. And it's and there's like a audio engineering bay and everything, and there's like audio visual. And I go in a few minutes before I'm supposed to go, and it's empty because people are going to come in, I'm thinking. So I go in, and it's like it's kind of in the corner of this big sprawling section, and I'm like, okay. So then I start filming it for Instagram. So I say, if you're at this event, come to this room, because I just want to make sure it's not empty when it starts, because get a little nervous.
Yeah.
And this would have been probably 2 years ago, maybe 2, something like that, 2 or 3. And I think it's about 2 years ago. Yeah. And I go in, and the person comes up to the stage person comes up who's doing the audio too. And she's like, I'm like, hey, and she's like, hey, didn't they tell you? Didn't they tell you? And I was like, what? And she said, oh, this isn't your room anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. And she said, let me take you to the other room. I was really hoping to see you, but let me take you to the other room. So I was like, man, I got to delete the page, and like they're going to put me in a smaller room because they couldn't fill this room, because obviously there's nobody there yet, and it's only a few minutes till it starts. So I was like, oh, okay. And I was like secretly like crestfallen. I was like, oh, okay. So she starts walking me to the other room. She walks me, go through all these different places. And I pass by all these little smaller rooms. I'm like, oh, and I start to mentally prepare myself. Like, it doesn't matter if there's 10 people in there. You're going to do your thing. You're going to touch somebody today. Like, don't worry about it. So I do that. And then she comes, and we're like in the middle of the whole place. It's like a big hotel that it's in. And we're in the middle of the main lobby now. And she's like, it's in here. She's like whispering. And she's like, we got to whisper because there's something going on in there right before you. And I'm like, what? She opens the door. It's the grand hall. It's the biggest room in the place.
Yes.
Hundreds of seats. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, we had to move you, didn't they? They didn't tell you anything, huh? I said, no. She said, we got so many requests for you once people knew you were going to be here that we had to bump someone from this room and move you to the biggest room as a headliner. And I'm like, what? And I just go in, and like 5 minutes later, I'm on stage speaking to the co-founder of the event, and there's just hundreds of people there. And I just like, I couldn't believe it. But I had in my mind relegated myself to something else, because I just immediately was like, oh, this must mean I'm being downgraded.
Yeah. We go through that so often as women, as Black women. We're being told, we're never enough, that people won't want to see us, so companies don't want to invest in us. Yep. And so we start to believe that narrative that someone else created for us. And when I read that part and listened to it too, because I did both, I was just like, that's me. Because I would have said the same thing. I said, oh, shoot, they done got 3 people to sign up for this section. And now, how did you even make it through your talk after that? Because the adrenaline or fear would have probably I would have been knocked out. How'd you make it?
I had stage fright as you probably know from the book, I had stage fright up until I was 36, and like severe stage fright. And this would have been a few months after I had started to conquer it. And so it was, I have to be honest with you. I remember being on, I can picture it. I remember being on the stage and I wasn't nervous. I felt at home. I felt at home, and we were sitting in 2 seats, and I was thrilled. I wasn't like, I was like, yeah, woo, look at me. It was more like, it was like, cool. Okay. For the people who are spending their time right now, just like today, for the people who are spending their time, I'm here for them. Like that's just how I feel about it every single time, no matter how tired or no matter what's going on, it's just like somebody would want to spend their time like hearing me speak.
Yeah.
Okay, we're here.
And that's all facts, guys. I have been a part of your mastermind group, and you showed up every week to really allow us to have a moment with you. Whatever it is you were teaching, we were going through almost like a book club style, where we went through some of the chapters and the themes from the book, and we learned so much about you and how you really helped us overcome a lot of these things that we that are in the book that you guys should all go buy right now on Amazon. It's about damn time. It was a really great I've never been in anything like it. Hundreds of people would sign into her mastermind, and you would give us exercises to help us. The headline. Can we talk a little bit about how you helped us create our headline? And when I read that from the book, I already wrote my headline before the mastermind. And so when you did that exercise in class, I was like, I probably came up with a new one by then, but I was ready. And that's what the headline is all about.
Yeah, I think, I'm not creating anything too brand new. It's just my take on it. And it's this idea of being able to imagine what you want out of life. Some people do vision boards. Some people have other ways of doing it. My way of doing it, I just discovered it a few years ago, is I discovered that if I type in, for me it was typing, for other people it can be writing, but if I type into a draft, a headline that I want to read about myself or what I'm working on for the future, like a future headline. And if I can craft that headline 13, 14 words or fewer, it helps me to look at that every once in a while and bring me back to what the goal is. So it's just another way of really honing in on what you want. Because a lot of times that's the secret, the key to everything, So many people write books, have coaching platforms, do all these things. And what they're really just telling you, you don't have to spend any more money about it, is really dial into what you want out of life and walk towards it. So I started doing that, and I did that. The first major one that I did was Arlan Hamilton's Backstage Capital invests in 100 companies, and I put the date as 2020. And this was years ago. And we reached that in 2018. But I would look at that definitely every week, and sometimes some spurts I would look at it daily, and I would go back in there, and because it was typed, I could go back in and maybe change a word here and there, tweak something over a few months and just say, because it's for you, it's not for anybody else, it's for you. So you don't have to, it's something special about crafting it, being 100% honest with yourself. And you definitely go for the moonshot. But if you want to change something a little bit, you can change it, and you can say, okay, what I've learned and picked up the last 6 months leads me to believe that the date's going to change or the number's going to change, but the intent is not going to change. And so it's just this powerful tool that I go into in the book and give into detail about how you use it.
It really did serve me. I was a vision board person. I still am a vision board person. I'm a goal setting and planner type. But when you said the headline, and I wrote my headline, and I declare I will manifest that Marsha Guerriere will help over 1,000 women start and grow their businesses.
Nice.
By I think I forgot what ridiculous date I did. I did like you. So I'm hoping it'll manifest sooner than that. In deciding to start this business while you're homeless, what kind of grit, what did it take for you to do that? And the business that you were in or you were deciding to go into required you to have other people come in. So when I read your bio a little earlier and we said that Backstage has now raised more than 10 million, I know there was some news this year that you way surpassed that 10 million mark, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of it is included in that. So we're probably about 13 million, but I don't like that number, so I'm gonna wait until we have more before. It's just superstition. But yeah, Mark Cuban has invested a total of 6 million into a fund that I manage. So I get to make the autonomous investment decisions out of it. He is a silent partner in it. And you saw what he just did with that player that used to be a Maverick, who had got really on drugs and really probably could have ended up dead if not had so many of his friends tried to intervene, but you just don't know exactly what to do. Mark went and picked him up with his mother's help. He went and picked this person up from a gas station in his car and drove him to get help, and now he's doing okay. He's got a long road ahead of him, and you never know what's going to happen. But Mark, I think people kind of think of him as one way because they see him on TV or they see him on the Mavs or whatever. But I think he has like the biggest heart for real. Like I think he really cares.
Let me tell you, I watch him, and like I said, I study Shark Tank like it's a job, and I watch him the most because you could tell his authenticity in the advice he's giving and in the businesses that he's selecting for the reasons. He truly do believe in the people he invests in. So for me to see that Mark invested in you, I was like pat on the back. So I know my mentor from the side, even though you're really truly my mentor. I'm like, yep, my mentor, she got it going on. Somebody like Mark that I really look up to as well from afar. When I saw that, I said, "Ooh!" My coach in the chat, Coach Tawana, said she is so amazed that her client, me, because she's my coach, is interviewing her mentor or her idol. So it's a full circle, and that's how the circle ring of networking happens, right?
This is all for the same purpose, right? Because the conversation we're having now, somebody's watching it right now and saying, okay, I know the idea. I know how to lock into what I'm supposed to do next, or I have the inspiration to do whatever I want. They're going to go on to then inspire other people. That's going to probably come back to us. It's just it's really cyclical.
It is. I wanted to talk to you and share with everyone. So I have coached one-on-one with you, Arlan. And let me just tell you, in probably within the first 15 minutes, she was like, dial it down, circle back. This is what you need, because you speak to a venture capitalist, you speak to someone investing, and you think your business needs money from outside, right? And you were like, no. Calm down. You don't need to give away equity in your business. You do have a great brand that could potentially be investable, but you could do this on your own and keep all your coins yourself. And a lot of venture capitalists, they're for the money. If they see a brand that is potentially a great money maker, they're going to want in. But you really removed your ego and yourself from that decision. Or maybe you was trying to tell me you didn't like my brand, but I don't know. I'm gonna say
that's not the case, not at all. I talk to hundreds of companies a month. I probably talk to at least see the deck or at least send like a little email or something. And absolutely, I want to own different pieces of different companies, right? That's what I'm doing. That's my job. But first of all, I'm never going to be able to invest in all the companies that I want to, and that's not what this is really about. It's not a winner take all sort of situation. Second of all, I say more than not to people, at least know your options. I'm always going to pull somebody to the side and say, look, even though we're negotiating right now, I want you to know
that this taking money from us means that you have less power, less control. You're going to make less money in the end, most likely, because you're going to have to give up the dilution here. And this is just the beginning. Then you have to be on that hamster wheel and keep going and keep feeding the beast, you know? And when I see your company, I see, like, I just put myself in your shoes and I'm like, man, I would want somebody did do this to me. Somebody did take advantage of me not knowing. And they gave me some money in exchange for something way more valuable today.
Right.
So it's like my quest to make sure other people don't do that.
Wow.
At the time, I thought, oh, this is a lot of money for the thing, so I'm going to go for it. And now I'm like, man, I'll do anything to get that back.
Right.
So for you, I see, that's why I made that statement, because I do see the value in it. I'm like, you could just be good, you know, personally, you could just be good right now and in control and making the decisions.
And I took your advice very seriously, and in really a short a matter of time, I started to manifest the things we talked about, and it's starting to take shape. And I'm just amazed by how God put things in place for me to do the things in the right order at the right time. So thank you. I wanted to ask, what type of companies then do you look for? What is it that would make you say yes to an opportunity?
Well, for the different buckets that I invest out of, we are looking for, we try to get in early, because the upside of that is higher if you get in early. If something is valued at a certain place and you feel like it's going to explode in growth, then if you own a piece of it, that becomes more and more valuable. So that's part of it. Not to say that we won't come into a company that's been around for a while, especially if it's still growing, but that's one thing. But we can't necessarily go into a company that is just an idea, because there are so many ideas out there and you're just getting started. It's a lot of work to get you to where you need to be, and we don't have the resources or the bandwidth in order to help in that way. That's why we spend so much time at scale talking to all kinds of founders who are early, who are super early. So that's why I have the book, and I have the online course that you were talking about, and I had the mastermind, and we have things on backstagecapital.com, resources. That's for people to kind of prepare themselves to come see us. And then, I mean, the main thing we invest in are tech-enabled companies or tech companies. That's just what we do. We don't necessarily invest in brick and mortar one shop places. Today, we are, again, if you sign up to our mixtape newsletter at backstagecapital.com, just sign up to our newsletter. Every 2 weeks, we send out all kinds of links for grants, for things that sometimes are non-dilutive. Sometimes they are meaning that you get the money, but you don't have to give equity back. Sometimes they're contests, pitch competitions, like I know you're doing. And we'll put that in these emails, and then another way to see what we invest in, a real easy way to see it, is to go to backstagecapital.com and look at our portfolio. Click on it. You'll see pictures and click on what they're working on. And it's very interesting across a lot of different industries. So you can, once you look at that, if you're interested, you can sign up for office hours with us on that same website, and you can actually apply if you want to. But I would wait to apply until you feel very much so ready to knock us off our feet.
What you're doing now, and you've taught many of us that are part of your mastermind about becoming investors ourselves. You open it up for a pool of people that kind of fit the bill. There is a lot of criteria to be an investor, and you allow regular folks, common people, to invest in underserved and underrepresented. And I think that's an amazing thing. And you're teaching us too. You're sending us the right resources to ensure that if we don't have it together now, we can work towards getting it together to be accepted as an investor. And you also have areas where if you're not an accredited investor, you allow people to get in on the good investment
Private equity deals.
right?
Yeah. So that's backstagecrowd.com. Backstagecrowd.com. Doesn't matter what your accreditation is. Like if you'll learn more about it once you sign up for it. But it's basically, if you're on the side, like you could be a founder or you could say, I want to invest in people, like Candid wants to invest in companies, right? So you could sign up to backstagecrowd.com, and depending on what you say your accreditation level is, and more information on the site, then you'll be sent some of our deals. And when I go out there, or when Christy or Chacho or Brittany, we go out there and we negotiate a deal, and we say, okay, we will put in 100,000, we'll put in 25,000, etc., for this amount of equity. That usually just goes to us, like the upside and all of that. We do all the diligence, we choose and all of that. Now what we're able to do since June is we can say, okay, we got 100K allocation, and 75K of that the crowd can get in. So you can get in for 1,000, you can get in for 2,000. If it's a crowd equity deal that is non-accredited, usually the minimums are 100 or 250, and you have now just become an angel investor in someone else's company that you appreciate. And we send those out very often, and so you know, at least once a week, so you can start to understand and look at all of the materials that we look at and start making, it's like, you know, honing your chops that way.
I think you guys, if you don't know enough about investing, angel investing, and venture capitalism, Backstage Capital is the perfect place that is really spending their efforts and their time to collect data, to collect resources, to share with you all. So definitely go out there and do that. Sign up for everything you can sign up. A lot of it is free that she hands out. I want to take it back as a CEO, founder, managing partner of a company. Beyond what you're doing to help others, you're also in charge of this whole shebang, right? What is the biggest challenges you have or you've had to face running your own company in addition to everything else?
I would say kind of figuring myself out in public, and I don't just mean public to like social, I mean public to the employees, and kind of all of your the things that you're not great at kind of come to light. And you know, it's definitely been fun. Fundraising has been difficult in the past. And then on top of that, you're thinking, well, now I have like all of these people who count on me for their livelihoods and for their health insurance and for this and that, and kind of get stuck there and like trying to become a better leader while the machine is moving.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I find challenging with my little old small company and having one or two part-time people working for me. So I can imagine what it's like. As part of your company, you're pitching every day, are you not, right?
Am I pitching to investors, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm no longer pitching to investors, but I'm talking to investors and having to, so I don't go out and actively like ask people for capital, but I do have conversations where people are like interested, and then I tell them about the company. But I have for since 2012, I pitched for 7 years, 7.5 years every day.
And in that time, how many yeses did you get? I'm not even going to reflect on the no's, right? Because for 7 years, we could imagine. When you started taking yeses, what did you think about what you were working on? That case study that you started.
Yeah. Well, I got mostly no's at the beginning for 3.5 years. Got no's. And because of what I was doing, I mean, I used to call myself the Bootstrapped VC, and I had a podcast called that, and you still can find that in archives.
but it is almost impossible to have an investment firm without money. So it wasn't one of those things where I could say, oh, I'm going to figure out a way to not have money. I had to figure out how to actually raise capital, so that I had to keep going. But it was a lot of no's at the beginning. Then I had a yes in September of 2015 from Susan Kimberlin. I talk a lot about that in the book, and we have an upcoming documentary that's coming out in the next few days. That'll show that. Yeah, you all are hearing that first. As far as like when it comes out just in the next few days. So we had a little trailer on our anniversary on September 15th past, and we'll be able to have that full length come out before the end of the month, most likely. And she's featured in it. And then after that, it's a total of a few hundred yeses at this point, because I mean, between all of our funds and all of the different things that we do, but that means thousands of no's.
Yeah. And you talk about self-care a lot. So before we let you go, I really want to know, what does self-care, what I love about you, and I follow you on Twitter too, and I'm always in those chats. She's like, I'm going to lay down, I'm on a break. You deleted your Twitter for the sake.
On the app. I deleted the app from my phone. I still have the Twitter account, but I put the app off my phone. It was just taking not just the time it took, but like the energy and the negativity. I could tweet, the sky is blue, and somebody's going to poke out and say, yeah, that's what you would say.
That's why I don't comment on Twitter, because it's not much for me at all. I stalk and I look and I'll share what's important. But yeah, they go far. But I appreciate you. You speak up. You're unapologetic about it. What are you seeing? And I know a lot of VCs are kind of, it's probably jealousy, to be honest, that you can be so unapologetic, and knowing that you're managing other people's money, and all tweets of the opinion of your own, I'm sure in the disclaimer. Are you seeing that other VCs are really honestly looking at underrepresented and underserved? Because, this year, with all of the issues that we have been brought to the forefront, everyone wants to make a statement and put up a black, dot on their thing. But do you feel that the industry is really listening and ready to make a change?
Yeah, I think there definitely is more money that's being put up there. I think that in some cases it's significant. Some cases it's just performative. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a huge. The thing is, we won't know for a while how real it is until we have time behind us to see if it was sustained. And I don't need it to be a ton of capital. I mean, it should be a ton of capital, but that's not so much the measure for me. It's the longevity of it is the measure for me. Is like, are you still talking about this next year when nobody's asking you to, or nobody's like shaming you into talking about it as this Fortune 500 company? Did that thing that you put in place? Let me see your executive talent pool now. Your executive C-suite compared to 2 years ago. Let's just see if it changed, or if you were just saying, "What's the least we can do?" and say out loud. I do think right now, in the micro, I can see some changes for sure. I can see some changes, and I see some really important organizations, especially on the nonprofit side, getting what they're supposed to get. But I want to make sure that people still don't relegate us to the heartstrings and think of us as the competitive, viable entrepreneurs that we are.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the word that you have been dropping on us today. I appreciate you more than you could know. I look forward to following you on Twitter, continuing our conversation on Twitter, learning more from you. Our next session, when I book one for our one-on-one, as I get traction on where I'm going with my business, just to check in and make sure you approve. I appreciate you for being accessible. I appreciate you for impressing upon our community and those outside our community how valuable we are to be invested in. And thank you so much for what you're going to do. I just want everyone to know you are actually going to go into a private session with our contestants today, just to give them that, like, you know, touch of advice. Bless them for the day.
Yeah, I will do that. I'm happy to do that and excited to meet them.
Thank you so much.
To have you here at Purdue for the Black Cultural Center. One of the things that really stood out to me as I read your book was about language and how intentional you have been, not just with the work that you do, but in the ways that you describe your work. And I think that is something that we can all learn from. And a lot of times when we're talking about race and we're talking about entrepreneurship within race, we often hear terms as underserved, underprivileged, marginalized. And one of the things that I noticed is that you was very clear to avoid that language and instead use underestimated, as in the cover of your book. Can you talk to us more about how Black people, women, people of color, and LGBTQ have been underestimated in the field of entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. And I will say that because this is for a college. I mean, it was our portfolio company founder, KG Harris, who actually came up originally with underestimated in 2017 and gifted it to us basically in a room and said, take it. And just, you know, every single one of us, I believe, here has been in a situation where you were mistaken for somebody else. You were mistaken for the help. You were mistaken for somebody who can give directions to where you're supposed to go when you're the one walking in the keynote. I have been handed too many car keys, and I promise you the next time somebody hands me their car keys to valet, I am going to take that car because I will consider it a gift this time. And so that seeps its way into the working world and in tech. I mean, I have, unfortunately, you know, the good part about working with so many founders is that I get to just have a front row seat to all this innovation, of course, and be part of it. But the unfortunate part is that I get to hear all these stories and kind of like en masse, you know, a ton of stories, and there's too many to mention here, but you hear the stories of the Black male founder who has maybe a white counterpart, a white woman, white man, as their subordinate. They walk into a room to a meeting and the person goes to the white person to shake their hand first because they must be in charge. Women ultimately have been relegated to taking notes in meetings, even if they're the CEO. And that's just like the lightest version of this. And so ultimately, I don't think people are unfortunately, still don't look at this because of these terms, underprivileged, minority, et cetera. Even the word minority upsets me because it shrinks you, right? People just go to their heartstrings about it, and they think, oh, is this a good thing? I'm doing this charity. I'm uplifting. I'm empathetic. Or they think of it as like, there's nothing for me to worry about over there because they're not up to par with me. Well, guess what? You know how many people have lapped the competition? Every one of us here has lapped their competition at one point or another in some way. You just have. I know it. And they don't see you coming because they're underestimated. So we try to flip that on its head and try to make it a positive because they don't see you coming.
And I can speak to that as well. I've had moments where I was the managing director of something, and because I was a woman, they looked at the man next to me and said, what should we do? And the man looked at me like, actually, it's her.
Yeah. Thank goodness for those men and the allies who do that.
Exactly.
And for us to be allies and do that in those situations. Like, why are we not, you know, why would you look over there and why would you assume? But it's because of the way we're all kind of programmed. People have been programmed to think certain things.
And I want to stay in that vein of programming. I think it goes very well into my next question. The other side of that is imposter syndrome. Because we've been programmed to think, oh, this person shouldn't be in this position. Sometimes when it's us, we may feel, well, maybe I don't belong in this space. And for you, how have you been able to overcome that? How have you been able to challenge that?
I no longer even subscribe to the idea of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't even think I think it's like we've been gaslighted for so long. We have been told that we're not supposed to be in a space, like you said. We have been told that we are less than. I think that's somebody else's personality defect that's been projected upon us. So I don't even subscribe to it. Of course, it wasn't overnight, and I'll be 40 this year, so it took time. But really, you start, anybody see the Michelle Obama Netflix special, the documentary, where she said, and luckily got to see her do this live, but she said this, she said that she has been in literally the most impressive rooms, the most important, the most powerful, I think is how she put it, rooms in the world. And she looks around in some of these rooms and she says half the people don't know how they got there themselves, because half of them aren't qualified to be in that room. And that's when she learned, and I relate to that so much. She just learned, like, man, some of these people just got here by the skin of their teeth, like, you know, because somebody's parent was something, or because, you know, they had this money or this kind of access, or they were at the right place at the right time. And I think so many of us are try to play by the rules. We try to play the rules. Okay, these are the rules, and I got to play by them, and that's going to, you know, it handicaps us. And because so many of us are so earnest, and it's not to say you should break every rule, but it's also just think, like, let's be realistic. How many of us have had a boss, even working, I think, you know, even back to working as a teenager and up in my early 20s, like, how many people have had bosses that you're like, I could do their job. I could do their job easily, and I should be doing their job, and they're getting paid 3 times as much, and this and that. It really just comes from this whole idea of taking stock of what reality is. And of course, sometimes you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you're in over your head, of course. But everybody had a first day of some job. Everybody had a first day of some job. Not everybody is just born knowing how to do things. Everybody had to figure it out. And so I build from that and take from that confidence.
Absolutely. And it's something that I'm learning to do. So I benefit from hearing you say that as well. I talk to a lot of undergrads and, of course, a lot of doctoral students like myself who are entrepreneurial, or they desire to go into their own business. And a lot of times we're just lost about how to get started because we're trying to go by the rules, as you said, or in some cases we may be trying to major in entrepreneurship, but sometimes we're in those spaces and we realize the type of businesses that they're talking about aren't representative of the businesses that we're trying to do. In a lot of situations, they are representative of tech and of startups, and not maybe, you know, a brick and mortar restaurant or a fashion boutique or whatever the case may be. What would be your advice to someone who wants to get started as an entrepreneur, as a college student?
Who is in charge of describing and directing what the definition of entrepreneur is? You are an entrepreneur if you're. It's just like okay. I don't know if you all will get this, but because you're so young. But Sister Act 2.
Yes.
Someone told Lauryn Hill. She said, "You don't. You know, if you wake up thinking about it, you're a singer. You don't have to. Nobody has to give you permission for that." There's going to be some people who are elitists and some people who are entitled, and they're like, "Well, you're not doing it the way I'm doing it, so you're not doing it right." Okay. This country was, well, if we were real, the country was built on our backs, but the country economics, you know, further than that, were built on small businesses, brick and mortar businesses. There are more brick and mortar businesses, and there will always be more, in my opinion, than there are tech companies. So if that is what is in your heart to do, that's what you should do. And there's nothing to say that your brick and mortar won't morph into a tech business or have a tech component to it. And there's nothing to say that it has to. You only have this one time here in this body No matter what you believe religiously, in this body, this one time, I believe we only have the one time in these circumstances. Live it, live it to the fullest. Do what you want to do. What you're the one who has to wake up and do the job. So what you're going to say, well, this person said that I wasn't a real entrepreneur because I wasn't on product hunt, or I don't have venture capital. Who are they? Why do they have time to tell you that? Why do they have time to even put their head over there and say, So I would just say, just go all in, make mistakes, pivot, change your mind, have fun, give, impact, and hopefully along the way you make some money from it.
Hey, I'm trying to get there.
Yeah.
I got all the other tenets. We got to get to that last one. And so this question I have is about the creatives. So when I first met you last year, I had a question about those who are creatives, whether it's podcasters, storytellers, artists, whomever, and they're looking for investors. And they're having this conversation about capital and whether or not venture capital is for them.
Yeah.
Is it for them? If not, what other avenues for funding can they go to expand?
In my opinion, and in my experience, it is a rarity that a creative person really benefits from venture capital. There are some times where you can apply it, and it's like you're an artist, and so you want a better way to get paid, so you build a payment mechanism that is beneficial to artists, and that's the tech play. And then that is interesting to the venture capital. But really, and then there's also ways of getting music and getting different pieces of art out to people. Like there's certainly those creative minds that built that. But when you're talking about like being an artist, like I did an interview actually, you can hear the audio of it on my podcast called Your First Million. It was from a few months ago, and it was with Khalees, the singer. And she was talking about, she's has her hand in a lot of pots, right? And she was talking about this way and that way and being an artist and all of that. I think that, it's a great conversation if you're an artist to think about it. I think less about venture. Like people ask me, how long have you wanted to be a venture capitalist? Never once did I say I want to be a venture capitalist. What I said was I want to get capital and resources into the hands of underrepresented founders. And this is the tool that I see in order to do it. I studied it, I built my craft, honed my craft, and that's what I'm doing. But I don't have any sort of I don't think less of anybody who doesn't use venture capital, because it's only for a specific number of companies. So I think that that, in addition to my belief that as much of control that you can keep of anything you work on, whether it be your company or your art or anything, the better. Those two things make me say the finding a way to bootstrap. And I know as soon as I say it, some people are like, oh man, they're like, that's a lot of work, and that's figuring out. I've been trying to bootstrap for 5 years, and where am I? I have to tell you, I'd rather make 10 times less, or a tenth less. Yes, I think is what I'm trying to say. Nine tenths less, and have more power and control than the other way around, because that's more valuable. I said, you know how many times I sit around and talk to people who are like millionaires who are miserable because they own 5% of their company and everybody else gets to tell them what to do. But I talk to people who have full control. Another good example of a great interview to listen to is Janine on Your First Million, Janine. She talks about she was signed to Atlantic Records, and then she was dropped. She was signed a $1 million record deal, and it was like everybody was fighting for her about 6 years ago. And then they took her music. She recorded a few things. She had to wait for their permission to release things. She had to do this, she had to do that. And it wasn't just Atlantic's fault, because, it's like the record business. And then they dropped her. And on her walk home, because she was walking home, she was so sad. And then like halfway home, she was like, wait a minute. That means I can tour when I want to. I can drop music when I want to. I can record when I want to. I can have control over all of the elements of it. And she has not made more money since when she was dropped. She's made more money since she was dropped than she did in that $1 million deal, because she had control of it. She knew herself. So that's a great episode to listen to if you're an artist.
Thank you.
Chacho put it in the chat. He put the link.
Chacho. The next question is about where you see Backstage Capital in the future. I know in past conversations you said, like, hopefully, in the past 5 to 10 years or so, there won't be a need for Backstage Capital because it wouldn't be just this exception. It'll be the norm to support people who are Black, people of color, women, and LGBTQ who are founders. If that was to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, what would you like to do next?
Oh, I think I can do both. I think Backstage is going to kind of adapt to what we need to do. And I think the next decade is so bright. It's so exciting. And I'm just looking forward to it. The next year or so, I'm bummed I won't be able to be around people and I won't be able to, do the things we thought we were going to do. But I am so looking forward for that decade. And what I will do in addition to and instead of, depending on how that plays out, if we become obsolete, is on the amplification part of things. I really enjoy writing the book, It's About Damn Time, that you showed earlier. I really enjoyed that process. I just, it looks like I'm going to have a career there with releasing a book maybe every 2 to 3 years. I've been working on not only my interview podcast, Your First Million, but I've been working on a scripted podcast that I'm producing that is interesting, that is getting, going the rounds, working on a television show, working on a movie, just different ways to kind of express myself and to amplify the work that we already did and the work that we're doing. And then I just think about all of these companies, like not just the ones we've invested in, 150 companies we've invested in, but just the companies and the people and the individuals who are working on everything from that lifestyle business that is just going to make them, 6 figures and real comfortable, to the $1 billion companies if they want, everything in between, by Black and brown founders and women founders and LGBTQ founders. I get to just watch that. I say I have the best seat in the house for that. So just watching that and picking up the phone when I can and connecting people when I can, I'll never stop doing that.
I can't wait for all of the movies and all of the books to come out.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We'll see what happens.
I'm loving it. So I want to take the last question to talk about this book. It's About Damn Time. Because one, I love the title.
Well, I love the way you say the title. I want to get you recorded, and that's going to be how I say it from now on. and Mississippi, so I love the accent, but you just say it with such fierceness.
Because it is. It's about damn time.
Yeah, see?
We got to keep that energy.
I just said it better myself.
I'm loving it. So one of the things that really stood out to me was literally you at the airport using the airport's Wi-Fi to research all the information that you needed to do, but also the relationship that you built in that process, and how you was able to go to different trainings at Stanford and whatnot to learn about venture capital. And so I want to talk to you about the value of relationships and the value of perseverance in that moment. Because a lot of people could have thrown in the towel if they was in that position. Mm-hmm. A lot of people could have said, you know what, this ain't my time. But you're like, no, it's about damn time I get this together and I'm going to do it. So what would you say to someone who is in maybe not exactly that position, or they could be, but what would you tell them about relationship building and about persevering through adversity?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the idea of not burning bridges, no matter what your circumstances are. One of the things I talk about in the book is that even when I was broke, housing insecurity, didn't know where I was going to live, didn't know where I was going to eat, food insecurity, all of that, even during that, the life goes on, right? Life goes on around you. And whether people know about what's going on with you or not, life goes on. And so sometimes when you're feeling like that, or even when you're going through even much worse, I'm not going to dismiss the privilege that I have of being able to be of sound body and mind, right? and not have children to take care of, and et cetera, et cetera. But even when that's happening, sometimes you feel like you can afford somehow to be short with people. You can afford somehow to disregard people and not be a good person to other people. That stuff tends to come back to haunt you later when you are doing better or when you're wanting to do better. That's not to say that I have like a pristine track record of being a great friend or being always there for people or whatever. But it's to say that even during my darkest moments, I tried my very best to be a quality human, like to try to really keep those connections and to be good to people and not project, and when I didn't have a penny, I had two things that were tried and true. I had the love and support from my family, my immediate family and my extended family. And then I also had the network that I was building, because a network is like a net, and it is there your entire life. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it gets bigger, sometimes it has holes in it, but you want to build that consistently over time. And there are people who I met. I have a good example, even somebody I met 4 years ago. I just had a phone call with Chacha yesterday with this person. They came to my house 4 years ago. We were working on something completely different. I had been in business for about a year, didn't have much to show for it, but was, open and said, how can I be helpful? How can we work together? 4 years went by. I did not hear from this person. 4 years. Yesterday, we got a conversation where they may be the key to unlocking a television show that I'm about to do. And it's because they remembered the way that they were treated in my home, in that 30-minute meeting that we had in my home office. They remember oh, you tried and true. That's a long way of saying that you have to strategically think about your network as the asset that you hopefully build over time and never goes backwards. So no matter where you are financially or in other ways in your life, because it's always going to have a return on investment later.
Your network is your net worth.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. I want to pause there and say thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions, for all the support that you have given to many entrepreneurs over the years through the podcast, through the book, and so many other things that I can't wait to see is going to be in store in the future. I want to take this time now. We have 6 to 7 minutes, and open the floor for any questions that anyone may have. Just drop them in the chat and we'll take a look at them.
Yeah, don't be shy.
And make sure you buy the book. It's available now. I got my copy. Y'all need to get y'all's copy. Veronica says you bought it.
Nice. Thank you, Veronica. Is everybody in the same city, or are we coming from different cities?
Nope, we got a little bit of everything. So we got the home base of Purdue. We got Alabama is represented. Birmingham is represented. A few other places are represented as well. So,
and if you're a student, the BCC, the Black Cultural Center, purchased the book, so it will be in the library system, so you can check it out if you can't afford to buy it.
Oh, that is so cool! Oh, I love that. Oh, I wish I could see that in person, with the little sticker on it and the little code.
You know what? I'll send you a video. I'll send you a video.
Okay, that's cool. And I think is my mom here?
I saw her.
Mrs. Sims? Yep, she's right there. Mrs. Sims is here, born in Jackson, Mississippi, raised Jackson, Mississippi, went to Dillard, HBCU, Dillard in New Orleans. And sometimes she does not go off of mute because she doesn't like to be put on the spot, but just want to say hi to her. Let's see a couple questions come in. Oh, I'm so used to hosting.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So we got two. So the first one is, when networking, do you check in with people regularly? Do you have any networking tips for those of us who are introverts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to check in regularly if it's not authentic, if it's not sincere. You're not trying to do anything that's mechanical. But I will tell you something. The only advice my dad ever gave me before he passed away, and we didn't have a great relationship, but the only advice he gave me as a child that I still remember is, it was basically, it happened in real life. And so he said, don't just reach out to people when you need something. Keep those embers. And so that is something that I did keep with me. So you want to reach out when it feels right. You also, there are a lot of relationships in your life that are seasonal, and the person is in your life for a reason, for a season, and so it's not like you have to kind of keep a certain thing going, but it is a good idea to look through your phone and just say, have I reached out to that person in a while, and just see how, check on them with no ulterior motive. Introverts, I'm an introvert, and nobody really believes me, but I'm an introvert. My advice is just to do things the way that, again, it goes back to authenticity. Do things that feel right to you. You can do a lot of things network-wise while being an introvert. For instance, you can be a writer. You can write a blog. You can write a podcast that you have control. You can have a podcast you have control over. You can do things that get your voice out there and that people are drawn to, and that builds network very easily. And quality, and it's a quality network. So you can share so much where you control things. You can also go to events like this and you stay off. Like I just said, my mother, she's an introvert. She's staying off mute, but I guarantee you, she's taking notes, and when she goes to these events with me, she's up there with the note. She's the first person with the notebook. And so you can take in things, and usually in a crowd, when I say, does anybody have a Q&A and it's in person, I say, shout out to the introverts. And usually it's about half the people in the room consider themselves that. So you're not alone in that. So you can go one-on-one with people. You want to go to the next question?
Yeah. So can you talk about some of the dangers of hustle porn?
Yeah, just comparing yourself. Hustle porn is this idea of like the way, you have to work till you die. You sleep when you die. You're not working on the weekends. You're not doing it. You're not a real entrepreneur. All of that stuff that's just, somebody found a way to monetize that silly statement, right? And so the dangers are like you're comparing yourself to other people and you don't know the real story. You don't know the full story of what you're comparing yourself to. So you're looking on social media, you're looking on Instagram or whatever, and you're saying, man, they're really killing it. I'm not doing enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not successful enough. You have no idea what's behind really what's going on. And so to compare yourself to something where you don't know the full picture, it's a fool's errand, and it can burn you out. They say you sleep when you're dead. No, it's scientifically proven that if you get a lack of sleep, it kills you sooner. It's like smoking cigarettes. It has that same kind of effect on you. So, look up the stats to know the true stats of it. But things like that, I just think are so, not only are they dangerous, but if you think about it, a lot of those people who are saying those things don't have children, don't have a second job, don't have housing insecurity, don't have the things that you may be facing, and they're over there saying you're no good if you don't work on the weekends. Well, maybe they can work on the weekends because they have their wife taking care of the kids. Maybe they can work on the week. Maybe they can perform in a certain way because they have a 10-person team that helps them. How do you know? Right? So that's what I think about it. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's very foolish.
With we got 1 minute left on the clock. So with that being said, there are more startup orgs that are reaching out to Black founders and Black entrepreneurship support due to the racial climate. Do you have any tips on how to vet them?
One easy way is to say, let me talk to your portfolio. Now, some of them might be upfront and say, look, the reason we're reaching out is because we don't have very many Black people or X people, whatever the name, fill in the blank, in our portfolio. We're trying to fix that. We're trying to change that. We need to do better. And if they're honest about that, it's a good way to vet them because that's the first thing. But either way, so if they're not saying that and they're just trying to, tell you that they've always been woke or whatever, look at their portfolio. And if they are saying that, look at their portfolio and reach out to the companies that they have talked to. Go to backstagecapital.com. Look at our headliners that we call them. Reach out to a couple, not 50, because you don't want to spam, but reach out to 2 or 3 and say, how has Backstage treated you? reach out to these organizations and talk to people. They're vetting you, and a lot of them are doing a very poor job of it. They're doing a lazy version of it. You vet them. Back channels. They may give you a list of people to talk to. Cool. Do a shadow list. Do a list of people who it didn't work out, and see how it is, and kind of measure it, because nobody's perfect, but kind of measure it and say, do I want to be involved with that? Another way is to look at the things they have done, even if they're not great at the diversity parts of things. What other things are positive for them? You can do. There are a lot of breadcrumbs online for you to go and look at.
Okay. Well, we're at 3:31, so I want to be respectful of your time, Arlan. We got 2 questions that are left. I'll shoot them in an email if you're kind enough to, answer them if you would like, or.
Yeah, I think the 2 questions left are actually kind of, let me see. It says, what has been your most successful VC investment? We measure success in different ways. So there is not one that I look at and say, oh, that's the one that's the most successful. We have had a few who have gone on to raise tens of millions of dollars, or have generated that much in revenue, or who look like they're on their path to becoming $1 billion plus company. We probably have 3 or 4 of those right now that I can think of off the top of my head. And, you'll see those headlines in the next couple of years. And then we think of success in other ways, though, jobs created and other things. But yeah, I would say about 10%, no, about 7%, 8% of our portfolio has died off, has not been able to make it. Another 30% are active and kind of doing their thing. Another 10% are active and probably in danger. Another 45% are doing really, really well. And another 5% are probably like ones that you can see the path to unicorn status.
Okay.
And that last one was fashion sector. Are gravitating towards fashion. I mean, I see a few fashion companies that come my way. It's not really my thing. I don't know if you can tell or not, but I don't have any haute couture products in my club. But the fashion, no, I think it's interesting. I'll tell you what I do think is interesting about the fashion tech sector is like the stuff that's coming out mostly from Black founders, where it is that augmented reality. You get to shop in stores when you don't have to walk into the buildings because of COVID, and beyond COVID. Even it's going to be interesting to walk around. So I've seen about 3 good startups like that. So that's what I would find interesting, and then other ways that are just like the new frontier. That's what I got for you.
Thank you. I want to make sure, first of all, thank you to everyone who's been a part of both sessions, or even if you came for this one or just the last one. I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this segment. It really means a lot to us. It's really my privilege and my honor to be a moderator for these events for the Purdue Black Cultural Center. So shout out to the Purdue Black Cultural Center for doing this. So thankful. Thank you, Arlan, for being here. Thank you for all of you who are here. Make sure you purchase It's About Damn Time. You can go to it'saboutdamntime.com.
You do me a favor. Can you record yourself saying that and put it online?
I will send you something on Instagram. And also make sure you check out the podcast, Your First Million. Check it out. Oh, and the Food Truck Scholar podcast while you're at it.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, on behalf of Purdue University Black Culture